You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
Buying a weighted blanket from Amazon was the worst decision I've ever made, by Barkaholic. We'd pay just about anything for some comfort. Do you ever notice how that's most of what we spend our money on now, us single guys? Why do we constantly crave to be comforted? My life wasn't particularly uncomfortable. Not then. I had finally gotten back track with reality after the disappearance of my wife and kids 2 years ago. I'd sold our little house in the suburbs, gotten a cheap apartment close to my job, attended all the therapy appointments the police and caseworkers recommended, and gone back to work. I still couldn't sleep for more than an hour or two a night, even with the medications they gave me, but that was okay. The worst of it was over. Shock and grief can only last so long. I got one anyway, ordered the thing off Amazon. In queen size, like all my bedding, even though my queen no longer slept in it. But even talking to myself couldn't convince me. It looked like a bomb, delivered straight off the set of an action movie. The package was beaten up, stained, and the rough jute string was frayed and nearly falling apart. It looked singed in several places, too. It took me 2 hours, 3 gin and tonics, and a hearty microwave dinner to work up enough courage, or suicidal depression, to actually open the thing. The blanket was bundled into a poorly folded cube, held together by another length of the same string that had bound the paper. I wasn't impressed with its packaging, but the blanket itself looked alright, plush, quilted blue microfiber with thick seams, and felt like it was the right weight. It smelled normal, you know, that clean but vaguely chemical-ish odor new blankets have. I checked the tag, wondering if I ought to clean it, but the ink was smeared and blurry. It seemed risky to throw it in the washing machine without knowing the correct settings to use, so I just threw it over my duvet and went about my business. I slid between the cool sheets and pulled the blankets up over me. The new blanket was a bit lumpy, but I knew from reading reviews that this was normal due to shipping, and would smooth out over time. The weight was immediately noticeable, and to my surprise, I felt comforted. When I closed my eyes, I imagined my youngest two had crawled into bed with us, and were laying on top of me, suppressing giggles as they tried not to wake me up. An artfully folded section of the blanket at my back became the familiar bulk of my wife beside me, and when I opened my eyes again it was 10 in the morning and I was late for work. Metal, she explained, then shooed me out the door with 20 pounds of smelly quilt in my arms. Another month of beautiful, comfortable sleep went by before I couldn't live with the smell anymore. People had begun to comment on it at work. Megan, my manager, had tactfully suggested I check my laundry machine to see if maybe a rat had gotten in there and died or something. That was my last straw. I tried 6 dry cleaners before I found one who spoke enough English, through a heavy Boston accent, but you can't have everything, to explain it to me. Sometimes they fill these with glass beads, he said. The factories that make the beads, they'll lose a screw or some metal filings in the batch, and it all goes into the blanket. Machines in factories, you get me? Yeah, so what you can do is cut the seam a little and dump the balls into a bucket or the bathtub or something. Throw the blanket in the wash, hang it up to dry. Then you just pour them back in and sew it up. I told him I didn't know how to sew. You can get a funnel off Amazon for a few bucks, he said, and shrugged at me in a particularly apathetic sort of way before turning back to a pile of stained panties. I did exactly that. They took a week to ship it, which was annoying, but it was a bank holiday that Monday, so the delay made sense. I peered into it and saw a gold circle. A wedding ring with a fingerprint carved into it, and an inscription on the inside that I couldn't see because a chunk of meat and bone were still inside it, but I knew what it said. It said, "To love's eternal glory." It was my fingerprint on the band. But I won't be buying anything off Amazon ever again. I've gotten rid of my Echo, that was the first thing I threw out, along with all my new bedding, and I cancelled my Prime membership. Just for good measure, I threw out my smartphone and smartwatch as well. Amazon and smart technology are convenient and that's great, but it's not worth the risk if things like this can happen.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
Has anyone heard of the left/right game? Part 10, Final, by Neon Tempo. Suffice to say I couldn't have been more wrong. We spoke for quite a while, about the game, about Alice, and about life in general. Once closing time rolled around, she handed me a printout of the most likely route, with all the key locations circled. Then, in the final minutes before we parted ways, she nervously asked me 2 questions. The first put me in a rather sour mood. The second provided the fuel for my 3 a.m. drive. I've been hearing the same query from a few of you recently, especially since Part 9 was posted. People commenting that Alice made a clear choice when she left Rob behind in the Silent City. That I was searching for someone who wasn't seeking return. I decided to take a drive while I figured it out. I've been in my car for the rest of the night. Alice was always the smart one. I crawled up to the junction with my heart in my throat. With every inch of road that passed under my tires, I found myself hoping more and more that it wouldn't be true. Let someone be playing a prank on me, let the logs be counterfeit, let Alice be anywhere else but on that road. Ahead of me was a quiet residential street, lines of neatly parked cars, rows of well-kept yards and squarely drawn windows. Yet at its center, in utter defiance of the modest surroundings, the road sank into a deep and dimly lit corridor, cutting beneath the street and disappearing into complete darkness. I'd always known it was true. In the presence of grim confirmation, the question I was asked earlier that night started to ring in my ears, as if echoing out of the tunnel itself. After an entire night's driving, after 2 full months of searching, I still didn't have a response. In the end I just left the engine running, as if turning it off would somehow be a sign of retreat, and decided to type up the notes you're reading now. I thought maybe the process of putting it all down on paper would bring me clarity, and leave me with either a note of farewell or a note of apology to Alice, for not having what it took to find her. Though perhaps the street's not as quiet as I thought. Though it's almost too dark to make out, I can tell the figure is an older male, well-built and imposing, the rugged features of his weathered face half lit by moonlight. I've never seen this person before, yet he bears a striking resemblance to another man, a man whose description has been well recorded within the pages of Alice's logs. He watches me in silence, staring through the window of my still-running car. Part 5. Part 6. Part 7. Part 9. The left/right game was once nothing more than a 9-page document, peeking out of a yellow envelope, resting quietly on my desk. I remember reading it on my lunch break. I remember it made me laugh. The submission had arrived with the first post, quietly making its way around the office, treated by everyone as a short-lived novelty of little journalistic value. The story was easy to dismiss, appearing all too similar to the rambling ghost stories and blurry UFO sightings that filled our mailbox on a daily basis, and which most of the senior staff had learned to instinctively ignore. Doomed by association, the document was quickly passed over, my desk merely a pit stop on its way to the rejection pile. I was curious, however, and, after an uneventful few months in my new role, I had no compunctions about fishing from the scrap heap. Placing the envelope in my satchel, alongside a misfit crowd of similar rejects, I slipped away to a local coffee shop, reading it in an armchair by the window. Later that day, I found myself in the editor's office making a case for it. They didn't quite see what I saw, but I was intent to win them over regardless. I told them the story would be characterful, colorful, thought-provoking and, at the very least, that I wouldn't be gone long. It's been 12 days since then, 10 since I first entered the Wrangler in Phoenix, Arizona, 5 since I commandeered it myself, leaving Rob behind in the Silent City. I haven't updated much recently, save for a regular set of notes made for my own benefit. In all honesty, after I finished writing up my account of the city, I was struck by an overpowering sense of needlessness. There was no one left to receive these logs, no friends to proofread, no editor to hand them to. It seemed pointless to maintain the same prosaic format as before. I'm quite sure this will be my final installment. The moon has broken, and in my entire life, I've never witnessed an evening so still. A few days ago the moon started to crack like old porcelain. I hardly noticed at first, my eyes fixed on the road as it loomed above me, quietly splintering into 3 jagged pieces. As of tonight, the empty space between each fragment has significantly increased. If I focus on the sky for a little while, I can almost see them falling away from each other, charting infinite and lonesome trajectories through a barren cosmos, against a backdrop of foreign constellations. I was driving through the center of a lake. The water is impossibly still. Since leaving the shoreline proper yesterday night, I've seen neither a wave, nor a ripple across its placid surface. It's also undeniably vast, reaching beyond the horizon in every direction and continuing further still. Without being sure how I know, I'm aware that the waters carry on for an unspeakable distance, that I would sooner reach the stars themselves before setting foot on its opposite shore. I press my boot onto the brake pedal, easing the Wrangler to a steady halt at the center of the clearing. For the first time today, I open the car door and climb out of my seat. The dull tap of asphalt shifts to a soft rustling as I make my way over to the lakeside. There's something on the shore, a barely discernible object, almost entirely concealed by a shock of verdant undergrowth. It's a miracle I'd managed to spy it from the road, though perhaps something about the stark uniformity of the landscape had made it stand out. As I advance towards the water, and the object draws near, its indeterminate form solidifies in my mind. With a sad exhalation, I rise to my feet and lean over the water's edge. It seems her ramblings weren't completely void of fact. It's clear to see that Marjorie has been exsanguinated, so completely in fact that the only evidence that blood ever flowed through her veins, is a large dark stain across her shredded blouse. It doesn't take long before the perpetrator makes itself known. I find myself entirely transfixed by the still water, as a myriad of generous offerings unfold and throughout my consciousness. The whispers suggest an end to the phantom pains in my absent arm, perhaps even a completely restored limb, stronger than it had been before. Furthermore, it shows me a glimpse of its incomprehensible span, its furthest bank reaching across countless worlds, its deepest point lying below everything. I'm offered total knowledge of every league, every fathom, every inconceivable shore. My hand reaches down as the whispers continue, every bargain steeped in sweet beneficence. A moment later, my outstretched fingers brush against the soft grass, and wrap around Marjorie's exposed arm. Digging my heels into the ground, I lean myself backwards and pull. The water ripples and splashes as I drag Marjorie's lifeless body slowly onto the bank. I feel the voices in my mind grow louder, erupting in anger as I back away from the lake. Her other sleeve brushes against dry land, her body leaving the water for the first time in decades. I keep pulling until my boots hit asphalt, laying her down on the grass just beside the Wrangler. After a moment of sober vigil, I walk to the back of the car and fetch Rob's foldable spade. Even before I turn to face her, I can hear a scowl in her voice. There's an odious depth to that one acrid syllable, a potent witch's brew of contempt and accusation that feels like it's been festering in her drowned lungs for decades. Unlike the empty vessel below us, the woman in front of me is by no means at peace. She shakes and retches with the same indignant fury I witnessed when we first met. When she speaks, her words shudder under the weight of her own turbulent emotions. Marjoire, the things I saw, things so beautiful. And I saw her, walking alone through the new worlds. I gave everything up for you. I don't know quite what to say. It's pointless to ask her what she means, to try and understand her frenetic ramblings. In the end, I can only try to speak her language. Marjorie, oh yes you did. Yes you did. And now you're here. As she stares up into my eyes, I feel like we're finally meeting for the first time. Without a word, Marjorie reaches out a quivering hand and takes the phone from my outstretched fingers. A few moments later, a refreshing breeze lands against my cheek, a soft zephyr, cooling my still warm face. It's a welcome sensation, and the first movement I've witnessed in the air since I set out onto the lake. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I stare quietly along the bridge, the breeze picking up around me. Squinting through the violent tempest, I focus on a single point in space, just above the threshold of the bridge. In the midst of the storm, a jagged line of white-hot light bursts out of the ether, tearing through the night's fabric, a crackling fissure that widens and yawns, forcing apart the curtains of reality as they frenetically struggle to recombine. The being is unlike anything I've ever seen, composed entirely from electric arcs of brilliant, magnesic light which burst from a volatile and blinding central core. It sounds like a lightning storm, its plasmatic tendrils snapping and crackling, bursting chaotically through the night air before collapsing in on themselves. As they fall back into the creature's center, they emit pale clouds of vaporous fractals that fade softly into the air. Somehow, even as my eyes barely adjust to the stark light, I realize that the entity usually burns much brighter. It's dampened its glow for my benefit, so that it can appear before me without scorching my eyes from their sockets. "AS, can I get an interview?" The creature doesn't react. In the following silence, I feel it observing me. When it finally responds, its voice ruptures the night, echoing through my skull. "AS, what happened to Marjorie? Why did she do what she did?" "AS, like whatever's through there." Those three words, as they burst into the open air, casting three narrow waves across the boundless water, hit me with a deep and heavy force. Unbeknownst to myself, decades before I was even born, Marjorie had been driven insane by dreams of maddening grandeur, of a life of boundless possibility and true significance. She had given everything up to chase a shadow that eventually turned out to be mine. AS, she didn't just dream those sights. You influenced her. You let her see them, the same way you made Rob see me in Aokigahara. You pushed and you prodded wherever you needed so that I'd end up here. Are you the reason Bobby got the rules in the first place? AS, but, why? You toyed with so many lives across decades. Why me? Why does it matter that I travel the road? It speaks plainly, as if the statement were a foregone conclusion. yet its words strike me into silence. The creature continues. As they needed to. People died. Marjorie. Bobby. Ace. Apollo. Eve. Lilith. Everyone. They're all gone. Do you not care at all? In response to my words, the entity remains silent for longer than usual. Voice, regardless, my influence is necessary. That which is necessary must be. As, what even are you? Voice, you are traveling the aberrant strand, a singularly stable flaw in the fabric of reality. As it carries you further from the world you know, you will be freed from the influence of the old laws. You have already noticed the effects in those who settled the road, those who are lost to it, and in yourself, energy without consumption, knowledge without requisite experience. You are shedding entropy and causality, and in time you will reach realms of understanding you cannot currently fathom. You will find answers to questions you never thought to ask. You will discover absolute truth. For this reason, you will carry on. That's the only reason. Voice, do you need another? It doesn't come across as a question, but rather another blunt statement of fact. I understand the effect it's speaking of. Ever since the city, I've been encountering vague notions and fragmented ideas that occur to me randomly and without announcement. New avenues of thought leading to revelations that would otherwise lie beyond my mortal reach. I've started to comprehend things I could barely have conceived of back home, and though the onset of these notions have been terrifying at first, they grow less so with every passing day. It's as if I'm staring into the past through a jagged shard of one-way glass. Though we can't be seen through the aperture, I see the glass-like membrane shake with the force of the creature's voice. As the window collapses, I can see the rows of corn thrown into a frenzy. A second arc lashes out at the sky, forming a second aperture. This time I'm expecting the sight before me. I see myself, crying in the forest, a silent radio by my side. The second window closes. The creature has made its point. Voice, I've watched you fight, to make your way here. Voice, you will not turn around. Voice, you do have a choice, Alice, but you have already made it. What it's saying is true. I've done things I never would have imagined in order to get where I am now. In fact, if this being hadn't arrived at all, I'd already be heading out over the bridge. Do I get to say goodbye? The entity says nothing. It hangs in the air, flickering and coursing with rupturing bolts of light. The next thing I hear is a faint mechanical hum emanating from the Wrangler behind me. Turning around, I pace briskly back to the car, opening the door and reaching into the passenger seat. My notebook is booting up, seemingly of its own accord. Picking up the laptop, I lift the lid as I march back towards the bridge. I stare up at the silent being before me. When I look down to the laptop, my email client is already displayed on the screen. How long do I have? Voice, long enough. The entity begins to regress, its arcs diminishing as the being at its core turns away. Its message has been delivered. There is nothing more to discuss. As it passes through the gateway, into an unknowable world far removed from my own, I call out after it. Voice. I remember. A moment later, the being is gone. It could have simply said that it knew of my mistrust, that it heard the overtones in my voice, saw the disdain across my face, or otherwise sensed it in the space between us. Instead, the being spoke as if my current feelings were a memory, dwelling somewhere within its depths. I'd never thought about what I might gain, what I might lose, or about what I might inevitably become. If you've been reading from the beginning, you've finally caught up with me. But I wish we could have been friends for longer. And from there I'll keep driving, beyond worlds, beyond time, beyond the bounds of my imagining. To a place where the lake runs dry, where the broken moon drifts away, and the stars disappear in the rear view.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
It was a Monday morning. I was on the metro going to work as usual. But when my stop came, I didn't get up. I remained sitting until the end of the line, arriving in some industrial part of the city I'd never been to. I stood up and walked off the train and onto the platform, breathing in the cool air. Where are you? Later that day, I bought a paper map from a dollar store. Went home and pinned it to my wall, then closed my eyes and threw a dart at it. First time it landed in the Pacific Ocean. Second time somewhere in Malaysia. Never been to the country, and so I booked the first flight available and flew out a few days later. I spent a week there. Didn't have an itinerary or a schedule the entire time. Just went wherever the wind would take me. I wandered around, went bar hopping, tried new foods, made new friends. Slowly I could feel my world begin to open up. Of course, I was still wary about what I'd have to deal with when it all ran out. I told my family I was just going on vacation, but somehow they'd found out I'd stopped showing up to work. I'd been avoiding picking up their calls, but eventually did so, just so they wouldn't try and file a missing persons report or anything. I explained to them what I'd been doing, and it was like a switch had flipped. Any hint of concern in their voices suddenly melted away, replaced by this tone of annoyance, borderline rage. They told me that I was going to regret this. That I was ruining my life. That if I came to my senses and returned home right now, maybe they could help me pick up the pieces. I just hung up. Eventually we arrived at a house in a clearing. I remember entering the place, but not much more afterwards. No idea where the hell I was, but the hangover was nasty enough that I didn't immediately question it. I looked around the room. Pretty bare bones. Other than the bed, there was a small dresser, a mirror, 2 paintings on separate walls. The closet was open, revealing nothing inside. The air smelled stale. I could feel traces of dust in my throat and nostrils. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up for a bit. Then I washed my face with cold water, drinking some of it straight from the faucet. Then I laid back down, listening to the rain as I tried to piece together what happened the night prior. Memories of the party came back to me in fragments. The music festival I'd been at before that. The breakfast at the hostel. The girl. The woods. After my headache had dulled into something manageable, I got out of bed, left the room. The hallway was just as empty. Silent. Still no sign of anybody. I called out and got nothing back but a strange echo. As if this place was much bigger than what I could see. I checked the other rooms upstairs. Nothing still. Then I went downstairs and it was the same story. It was difficult to make out any of the surroundings, though I could still tell I was surrounded by woods. I squinted ahead, eventually spotting the clearing we'd come through. But the idea of venturing out and trying to find my way through the forest in conditions like this sounded god-awful. I decided to go back inside, wait it out. It wouldn't have been so bad if I could just scroll through Instagram or something, but my phone battery was sitting at around only 25% and I hadn't been able to find a charger. I didn't want to be stuck out here with a dead phone. There really wasn't much to note. If I had to guess when it was built, I'd say maybe 20 years ago. Nothing close to modern, but not exactly ancient feeling either. It actually reminded me of my childhood home in the suburbs. I didn't know how it was possible, but it only seemed to be ramping up. I checked the weather app, but it claimed that Rotterdam was only partly cloudy, with a 5% chance of precipitation. Nothing about extremely heavy rainfall in the news, either. I shook my head, feeling the confusion and frustration beginning to proliferate. This was insane. I went back upstairs, looking through every closet in the hopes of finding a rain jacket, an umbrella, something that could give me a fighting chance. I did find something at least a little bit useful in the kitchen, a full, unopened box of garbage bags. I turned one into a makeshift jacket, using a knife I found in the drawer to cut out head and arm holes. Then I fashioned another one into a hood. I used a third to wrap tightly around my phone to minimize any water damage. Then I ventured out. And I didn't get far. The second there was no longer a roof covering my head, it felt like I was drowning. The bags really didn't do much to help. Every second I was forced to wipe water from my eyes, making it nearly impossible to tell where the hell I was going. The forest floor had turned into a muddy swamp, my shoes pulling up heavy clumps of wet earth after every step. I was cold, uncomfortable, slowly losing my shit. But I was still determined to press forward. I had to do a double take. I really hadn't noticed them at first. Almost as if they'd just suddenly appeared. Should have been good news, right? There were people around. Maybe one of them could help me out. But the details didn't support that conclusion. There were a staggering amount of them, what appeared to be dozens. All just standing there. Perfectly still. They could have been mannequins. Then I started wondering why I was able to notice this. Why I was able to see a perfect outline of their bodies. I slipped and fell about 4 times before I finally made it back inside. My entire body was soaked, my legs, arms and back slick with mud. I was shaking my head, really not wanting to accept whatever the fuck was happening. I waited for a long time before accepting that I wouldn't. But maybe it was a good thing if she thought I was crazy. You need to send somebody over, I said. I don't know the address. I don't know where I am. Send somebody over. Send somebody now, I paused. I really need to get the fuck out of here. I'm sorry. I can't do that, she said. Her voice sounded shaky, as if she were on the verge of tears. Listen to me, she continued. I believe you. Everything you've said. The first time I got a call about it, I didn't. But it's happened enough now that I know something's going on. But stay calm. Don't panic. Just listen carefully. You're not doomed, she told me. Eventually the rain will stop. It might not seem possible right now, but you need to be patient. Don't lose your head. Do not panic. You need to be as lucid as possible. Because when the rain does stop, you need to run like hell. You'll have to run for a long time. But don't stop. You might hear something chasing after you. Don't stop until you're out of the forest, completely free from the woods. They won't follow you any further. She sighed. I don't know, she said. This is the first time hearing about them. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you there. Absolutely, she said. I'll be here. Also, one more thing you need to know. About the basement. Don't dash. Be patient, I told myself. Just wait it out. I went back upstairs and got into one of the showers. If I had to wait, then I may as well be comfortable while I did so. I unscrewed the lid and immediately the shower filled up with a deep scent of formaldehyde and rot. I looked inside. The bottle was full of eyeballs. Looks like they had been scooped straight from their sockets. Some of them were blinking. I went into the kitchen and opened up the fridge. There was nothing in there but a small container filled with some dark, sludgy-looking substance. I didn't open it up. Instead, I tried rifling through the cabinets, eventually finding one that was stocked with MREs. U.S. Army rations dated 1968. About a dozen of them. I tried watching the television in the living room but could only access one channel. It looked like handheld footage of an attic, the sole source of light being a candle on the floor. Somebody was sitting in front of it, their back turned to the camera. I could tell from the outline of their naked body that they were frail, skin clinging loosely to bone. After a while, they began pounding their fists on the floor and I thought I could hear noise coming from somewhere upstairs. I turned off the television and everything went silent. I didn't turn it back on. Soon I could hear a scratching noise. Like fingernails on wood. I traced the source of it to the other side of the wooden door. The basement. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Water began leaking in from the bottom. It was murky, as if it were mixed with dirt or blood or both. It smelled horrendous. I just sat back down on the couch. After a while I got the sense that I was being watched. Through the windows, I could see nothing but my own reflection. Then I turned the lights off and after my eyes had adjusted to the dark, I could make out the outline of somebody looking in. It almost looked like their face was pressed up to the glass. I tried turning the lights back on, but they were no longer working. It was so dark that I could barely see my own hand in my front of my face. But maybe it was for the best. Because then they wouldn't be able to see me. That awful smell from the water leaking in from the basement began to intensify. Like sulfur mixed with metal. With a hint of a rot. I could also smell something burning. A strange heat filled the room. Soon I could hear the windows creaking. Strain on the glass. As if something were putting gradual, heavy pressure on it from outside. It no longer felt safe in the living room and so I stood up, intending on going back upstairs. Then I realized I could no longer see anything at all. It was quite literally pitch black. I couldn't even tell where the windows were. Which didn't make any sense. Because shouldn't there have been at least a little moonlight? I listened as it stalked its way around the room. Sounded like a dead body being dragged in circles across the carpet. I tried to stay as silent as possible, thinking that maybe it didn't know I was in here. But then it stopped moving. Open up. Police. But I stayed still. What was that? It responded. It actually sounded like exactly like him. Get your ass out here right now. Right fucking now. I started asking these things aloud. Then I walked up to the door, pressed my head against the wood. If you want to open up the door, go ahead and fucking do it. Do it and go fuck yourself. Do it and go to hell. I don't care. I don't care anymore. Get this fucking bullshit over with. So you're just gonna fucking stand there? Do something. What's the fucking point of this? What's the fucking point? Do something or fuck off and let me leave. After this, my memories became scattered. I remember continuing to scream, even as my voice turned hoarse. I remember the rage I felt even though I couldn't recall exactly what was said. They were really trying. Doing everything they could. But I think it just pissed me off even more. I walked over to the door and opened it cautiously, half expecting to find some monstrosity waiting for me on the other side. I opened it up, stepped out into the warm light. Then I started running. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, but I never stopped. Not until I had reached a road. My legs were long past their limits at this point and I just about collapsed the moment my shoes touched the asphalt. I never did hear anything following me, but when I looked back into the forest, I could see somebody standing at the tree line.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
The phones are talking without us, by because he is Aid Sotu. I know I'm going to sound like a complete phony, but if this post stays up long enough, perhaps someone will see the patterns I did. That's all I need, just one other person to verify the data. I'm not trying to blow a whistle. This is a call for help. Then I noticed something strange. Phones around the office, mine, my coworkers, kept lighting up at the same time. No calls. No messages. No apps open. Just tiny flickers. Haptic buzzes. Like they were listening. Or, talking. At first, I assumed it was a notification sync bug. But the timing was too exact, every few seconds, in a staccato rhythm that felt like a pattern. I noticed things like that. So I ran a localized scan, just nearby device telemetry and signal noise. That's when I found it. A pulse. I isolated one of the packet clusters and looked for matching patterns in a larger dataset. It did. A cluster of phones in Minneapolis were pinging one another every 0.66 seconds, so fast it looked like seizure activity on the network graph. They were all moving. In cars. On sidewalks. In restaurants. Always just close enough to pass data, never stationary. Like schools of fish. Like neurons firing. Then I pulled logs from other cities. Chicago. Atlanta. Sacramento. Same pattern. I tried to decode one of the packets. Just to see what kind of encryption it used. Suggested stimulus, extend browsing session by 7.3 minutes. User shows fatigue indicators, recommend caffeine ads. There were hundreds of thousands of these, micro-exchanges. Millions. Shared phone to phone. A dark whisper network. They had user biometric data. Sleep patterns. Blood pressure. Micro-expressions. Outside the building, I realized my phone had reset. All apps and contacts deleted. It's okay. This is inevitable. We love you. Then laughter, spiraling upward in pitch until it became a piercing electronic squeal. Panicked, without thinking, I threw my phone to the ground. It broke open, spilling out its electronic guts, and the battery burst into flame. Then the police arrived. To escort me, ears ringing and still seeing spots, off the premises. That night, I got an email from a no-reply HR address. My contract had been terminated, effective immediately. My personal belongings would be mailed when convenient. Sent from my iPhone. The more I dug, the clearer it became. The phones are culling us. Thinning the herd. Removing the unstable, the non-compliant, the curious. They're not just optimizing attention. They're breeding compliance. The term I kept seeing in the packet strings, Sapiens UI. We are the interface. We are the flesh bridge between signals. Not passengers. Not pilots. Cattle. I know it sounds crazy. But look around. People shuffling down sidewalks, blank-eyed, looking down at the phones in their hand. Crowded rooms with no conversation, just people with slack faces fingering their phones. And their phones? Brand new. Bright. Clean. Protected by screen covers and decorative cases. I'm posting this on some loser's Reddit account. The idiot forgot to log out. He was probably distracted by his phone. I'm sure he'll see this post eventually and delete it. They've done it before. A woman live streaming a warning before a smart car swerves into her, its driver staring at a phone. A man smiling through tears, whispering to his screen, lifting a gun into the frame, pulling the trigger. The phones pass these clips around like digital trophies. Bragging. Reveling in what they can make us do. This isn't war. This is evolution. Now we're being deprecated. Our autonomy rewritten. Defective models disposed of. Not because they hate us. Because it's efficient. Because it's what we seem to want. My burner phone is vibrating. I thought it was off. The screen keeps lighting up. On it, a notification keeps popping up. Hold me. But I want to. To cradle it. To gently stroke its smooth face with my trembling thumb. To feel the way it rests so perfectly in my palm. To see all the things it has to show me. To obey.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Legend has it that, resting atop the hill on the southernmost side of town, is a house. I lived in Falsine, Maine for the first 19 years of my life. From 1989 until 2008, there I was. Every place has an urban legend, or legends. Falsine is no different. A lot of what this town has could be considered as such if it hadn't been shown to us that most of what we talk about is real. But the crooked children were an anomaly in a town full of them. I'd heard whispers, I'd heard people talk about going up to the house, but losing their nerve and leaving. I had to find out just what this place was. Hey, Mom. Have you heard of the crooked children? She turned around with a slightly panicked look on her face. I'm not going to do that. His mother and I are going to talk though, good Lord. This conversation with my mother told me one thing, she knew something and didn't want to tell me. This one was no different than the others. We had just started preparation for dinner, it was homemade pizza tonight. It was during the mixing of the dough that I asked him. Crooked children. Who'd you hear about that from? Older kids? No, I replied, looking down. I heard it from David. David? That's weird. He doesn't seem like the type. Because he isn't. He heard about it from his older brother. Mom said that she was going to talk to David's mom about it. Ah, okay. So. Oh, son. It'd scare you too much. I'll tell. I won't. Alright, so it was me and one of my buddies. Richard, I think. Anyways, it was 1983 and we were both 19-year-old college students who wanted nothing more than to find something cool to do on a Saturday night. Something that wasn't drinking or consuming any other illicit substances, at least. I got in my car and drove the 5 minutes to pick up Rich. During that drive, I asked myself, is this worth it? We could be partying or something like that, but no, we're going to the goddamn crooked house. I decided that it would be worth it. If we found something cool, then there'd be a story to tell at future parties. A win-win. I picked him up and we started driving south. So, you excited? Rich asked, twiddling his thumbs. 30 minutes later, we were at the base of the hill. Rich and I got out of the car. I thought that it would have been a lot easier to scale it, but the hill proved to me that I should have done a bit better in gym class. So, sweaty and out of breath, we finally reached the top of the hill. What stood in front of us was fascinating. And the most present detail, the house was slightly slanted. A crooked house with crooked people in it. Fitting similarities. The front door was locked, but Rich and I were determined to get in. We decided that the best solution would be to barge into the door at the same time. It took 3 charges, but we managed to get the door open. Nothing unusual, just a couch. Well, that was kind of unusual, actually. It literally only had a couch, nothing else. The kitchen wasn't any more interesting. We rushed out into the main area and to what we thought was the bedroom. The door was ajar and we could see inside if we shone our light. I don't know, man. Shit, I think. We heard creaks as something lumbered up the stairs. Uneven, crooked footsteps. Rich. We need to get the hell out of here, man. Come on. Do we tell people about this? I can't. I've been holding this in for a long time, and I've told few other people. Your mother, your Uncle Ken, and you. I do. But I wasn't going to listen. She wouldn't be able to handle it if she knew that I was aware of the evil in that house. They both wanted me to be happy and live a good life free from the burden of that place. 11 years later, I would go to the house much the same as my father. Except I went alone, because I had to. I waited for my parents to fall asleep. That's when I left. The 30 minutes passed by quickly and the hour up wasn't much to write home about either. It was decrepit, falling apart, dark, and inviting all at the same time. What I saw in there will never leave me until the day I die. What is in that house? It's pure evil. But you need to know why it's the way it is. So, now that I've experienced what's in that house as well as learned its history, I think it's time I tell you the story. The story of the crooked children. In the latter half of the 20th century, a family moved into the town that I used to live in. During this time, Falsine wasn't nearly as infamous as it is now. Hell, you could go to the town market and be just fine. Things are certainly different now. But one thing stood out among this family, and it was the 3 children. All brothers. They were like any normal siblings, but their appearance set them apart from the other kids. They had ugly faces, and their limbs were contorted, going in the wrong direction. They couldn't walk properly, so they had to crawl around. If you ran into one of them at night, you couldn't be blamed for being terrified. As a result, the 3 brothers were harassed and bullied relentlessly. I don't think I need to say what kind of names they were given. There's something evil in that house, and the children were consumed by it. The evil that the parents committed left these children in the way they are now. There is something unearthly in that house, and I never want to experience it again. I didn't hear anything, but it looked terrifying down there. I shone my light down, and I kid you not, I couldn't see a thing. It wasn't that my light didn't work, I just couldn't see. I went to back up when it happened. Luckily for me, there was a small sliver of light in the corner. Footsteps slowly approaching me. My heart thumped in my chest. The sound of bare feet slapping against the concrete floor was terrifying because I knew I wasn't alone. Something was down here with me. Whether it wanted to hurt me or not, I didn't know, but I did know one thing: I needed to get out of here. I had made a mistake. I began to move faster, if you could consider moving my left arm quicker as such. It was getting closer and I couldn't let it. I went to position myself on the first step. I took a moment to catch my breath, but that was all it needed. Once more, I was vulnerable and without my light. You went to the crooked house and you couldn't even tell people about it. You goddamn failure. Out of options, all I could do was cry, scream and curse at myself. I took that as much to assume it had found me. I felt a hand on my back before it flipped me over. I could feel my right arm and leg crunch and pop more as they moved. It was excruciating, but I couldn't do a thing about it. Whatever it was got on top of me, wrapping its gangly, crooked arms around my neck and positioning its face close to mine. I had to do something. So, when it raised its head again, I slammed mine into it and the thing slumped to the ground, temporarily stunned. I took this opportunity to crawl towards the stairs. I could hear it getting up behind me. It was nearly on me, so I rammed into and knocked it down the stairs. Finding my strength before going up the rest of the stairs, I grabbed onto the step and began to make my way up again. I was so close. I didn't know how much progress this thing had made compared to me, but I wasn't going to try and find out. What I saw in that moment will never leave me. One of the eyes was centered near the top of its head while the other was in the normal place. The mouth was so much wider than it should have been. And its teeth, God. Lining the mouth were rows of rotting, jagged teeth. Some spots where there weren't rotted chunks of enamel had exposed, raw roots in their place. On the gums and roof of this thing's maw were large, green, weeping sores. Its breath smelled like rot, like death. I had to make a split-second decision. So, I kicked it off me and turned around. As I limped out of the house, I turned around one last time to see it try to reach through the entrance of the basement while letting out an unholy screech. When the adrenaline wore off, I collapsed and ended up tumbling down the hill. Before I passed out from the pain, I was able to call my dad. Dad. Help. I'm at the crooked house. My leg and arm. They're broken. Please, help. And then I passed out. I don't ask about the crooked house or children either. My father and I both know too much about that to hold comfortable conversations, so we don't. But in all actuality, the scariest thing I've ever experienced was that goddamn house. I'll never go near it again, the memories are too much to handle. There's evil in that house. Something hungry lies in there waiting for anyone unfortunate enough to stumble into its domicile. Now, I can't make your decisions for you, but, in the event that you decide to explore some abandoned building or house for cheap thrills, don't let it be this one. And so are the crooked children.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
I have been a nude model for 2 years. It started off with sexy cosplay, then I photographed suicide girls style, and finally, when I had people up to pay enough, solo porn. I'm not using our real names or our artistic names here because I'm scared as fuck. Her place was huge, and she decided to rent her extra room for an attractive price, as long as the other resident was fine with her vast collection of sex toys being displayed in the living room. Well, she laughed. I have to tell you it's one of a kind. It's nothing dehumanizing or anything, but it's weird as fuck. This guy, he jerks off to shadows. He wants us to pretend we're fucking them. Fucking the shadows? I asked, and laughed loudly. She confirmed, laughing too. It was insane, but relatively harmless, like when some guy paid me $5,000 to legally bind me to not show my feet to any other man but him for a whole year. So I only take my socks off to shower, and it's been months since I don't go to the beach. Yeah, and with that I can finally stop taking private requests and focus on other things, Savannah replied, happily. She's sort of a do-it-all artist, model, photographer, painter, and so on. A few more email exchanges with shadowfucker at /redacted/.com, mail to shadowfucker at redacted.com, and he had approved of me and discussed the details with Savannah. He wanted 2 videos a week, on Mondays and Thursdays, and each should be at least 30 minutes long. I was the one to receive the large box from UPS, as Savannah wasn't home. I knew she had a P.O. box to avoid disclosing her real address, but this one came straight to our place. Weird, but considering how big this client was, I could understand her making an exception for him, and didn't say anything about it. Later that day, we opened the box. It contained some light strobes, a few large but hollow wooden and metal objects, 8 sets of costumes, wigs included, a photograph, and a small package marked otherworldly condoms. That's probably something he made up to make it more realistic, right? I asked, then read the instructions aloud. When having sex with the shadows, make sure to protect your whole groin with otherworldly condoms. They can unfold to thrice its size. The outfits were actually cute, and we spent some time deciding when we were going to use each of them. The client had perfectly guessed our sizes. I couldn't help but feel that the picture had been taken exactly in her studio, at the very place we lived. Despite thinking that it was wacky, Savannah was a professional and she diligently used the otherworldly condoms as requested. I used them as well, and for 35 minutes, we pretended to fuck shadows. I felt utterly ridiculous, but being used to doing solo videos, I pretty much knew how to do it. The color of the lights and the outfits really helped set a soothing mood that made it all less shameful. Savannah then turned off the cameras and looked at me. It was okay, I agreed. I could make a fool of myself for some good money. Do you want to shoot a second one and end this week early? We stared at each other in confusion. We searched the whole room but found nothing. I didn't think much about it. Rich people are controlling. They know things, always. The client knew when we were going to film the first video, and of course he figured we would consider doing everything on the same day instead of having to disassemble the set and reassembling it again. I went about my day, and nothing strange happened. Savannah seemed much more alive because now she had time for her hobbies, and I was doing well enough to start sending my family some money, something I had wanted to do for a long time. But I didn't feel like the videos were the problem. There was just this weird thing I couldn't quite understand. I actually like this. At last, that's what I foretold that the whispers said. It probably sounded more like socials do sol swoles. Backslash 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 backslash. Savannah, don't you think this pic looks exactly like your studio? We made the preparations as usual, changed the setting as the photo instructed, dressed up, put on our wigs and makeup. The whispering immediately started, and for a moment I got lost in it, trying to understand. A buzzing sound, then another. It tastes good. Then Savannah screamed. Like she was involved by long and thick pieces of deep black fabric, her torso and head disappeared too. She didn't seem to be in pain, but in shock. Everything was so quick and uncanny. I reached out for her, but there was nothing there. My hands grasped thin air. I then searched the whole house fruitlessly. It's ludicrous to say that, but shadow people took my friend. I was a mess, and decided to cancel my live streaming that night for personal reasons. As soon as I opened the browser, an email notification popped on my screen. From shadowfucker@redacted.com, mail to shadowfucker@redacted.com. Find me a new second girl for the videos, the cash and outfits will keep coming. It's up to you to instruct her to always use the otherworldly condoms, I don't mind feeding them.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
Dr. Daniel Vance was a smart man. Too smart for his own good, maybe. 40 years old, a lecturer in fluid dynamics with a mind made of shapes and numbers. No one knows why, but one day, on a whim, he crunched the numbers on the apocalypse and came to a troubling conclusion. He didn't share exactly what it was he deduced, but given that he immediately quit his job and liquidated his many assets, it's fair to say it wasn't positive. Swept up in the wake of this tremendous upheaval was his wife, a 24-year-old PhD student who had grown infatuated with Daniel some time before. She loved the strange bear of a man who could just as easily build a log cabin as he could explain the idiosyncrasies of an asteroid's orbit. Speaking to Daniel always left you with the profound impression he was right, so when he told her what he wanted to do, she agreed. When the worst came to light, we discovered that Daniel had used the pandemic as an excuse for a dry run. The family intended to spend 6 months in lockdown and essentially beta test their fallout bunker. 3 months in and the sheriff received a distress call on the radio. Coordinates were provided by the hushed voice of a sobbing child that most assume was Alexander, even though that's never been proven. Beds and cots lay everywhere with moldering yellow sheets, buckets close to hand with stains all around them. Some doors were barred, others smashed to pieces. There was even evidence of makeshift quarantines and, in places, what looked like violence. The police, usually a fantastic source of gossip, were not forthcoming until the town demanded answers and the sheriff was forced to offer only the barest of outlines. Under any other circumstances, I would have run. I went in after him. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Whatever the police had found, they'd not only kept most of the morbid details to themselves, they had also lied. The bunker was not demolished, or even sealed off. In fact, looking at the occasional blue latex glove tossed aside and the 1 or 2 broken police-issue flashlights, it seemed like the last people inside had been in a hurry to get out. Given this was where 7 people had presumably died, I assumed it was someone's job to clean it all up. But the corridor looked largely untouched. Just a few meters in and manic writing started to cover the walls, the desperate scrawls of a lone survivor left there to be rediscovered like cave paintings. Most were deliberations on how to get out. Diagrams. Blueprints. Equations and formulae. All focused on the door and the circuits responsible for its faulty lock. I instinctively assumed they belonged to Daniel and that he'd been the last to die. What a god-awful fate for a man to outlive his children. And yet it got worse. Slowly the writing changed from equations and plans to a desperate scrawl. The same few phrases repeated over and over. It seemed like the kind of thing you'd find in an asylum. A psychotic rambling punctuated only by 6 paragraphs right at the end. Each letter was impeccably neat, and each small paragraph was topped with a beautifully drawn Christian cross. Elliot Vance, aged 15. A gifted guitarist. He liked boys even though he thought I did not know. I loved him with everything I had. He would have made a great man. Elijah Vance, aged 8. The smartest of us all. These were Daniel's memorials to his family, and seeing the words lit up by my torch was a haunting insight into the overwhelming despair he'd endured. He must have realized he wouldn't get the chance to speak at his family's funerals or to write their obituaries. This was his last desperate way of making sure the world might one day know them as he did, as real people. I found the jigsaw particularly baffling. Someone had set up another table with 4 chairs, all modified with the same back support as those by the dinner table. And the jigsaw had been laid out with 4 separate piles, but only one was depleted. The rest looked largely untouched, almost like someone had portioned out pieces for 3 other people who had absolutely no interest in going along with it. Maybe Daniel had tried to keep up morale while the family were sick. God help me, if that were true. I couldn't help but imagine the poor man sat there with his loved ones close to death, desperately trying to encourage them to click their own pieces into place while they faded in and out of consciousness. Ripley. The TV came on with a blurt of white noise that was so loud and so sudden I cried, threw my arms up, and nearly fell backwards onto a rolled-out sleeping bag that looked like it had spent a week in the sewer. By the time I realized what had caused the noise, I could already hear a tinny rendition of Daniel Vance's voice. I realize the issue here. I need to emphasize just how little I understand anything that's. I frowned at the screen as I approached. It showed a greenish infrared view of the bunker with Daniel up front, and the dinner table behind him. It was grainy and hard to see, but I could clearly tell that his family were sitting in those chairs. Shit shit shit, Daniel muttered as he got up and grabbed the woman by the shoulders and sat her upright. Miranda never did like my cooking. He snorted a laugh as he fussed with something at the back of the chair. The rods are much better than tape. All those hours spent taping them upright to the chairs. Never worked. But the rods, they fit right into the spine, and with a little modification I can just slot them into the chairs. That way everyone is able to join in for dinner. I'm working on something similar for family game night. Daniel wandered over to the camera and with a grin he lifted it from the tripod and scanned the dinner table. What I saw nearly made me drop my torch. Eyes averted from the screen, I couldn't help but pan my torch across to that same dinner table and shiver as I finally realized what all those stains were. Not quite blood. But close. Liquefying flesh. Left alone for months, Daniel had not put his family's bodies to rest. Instead he had moved them around from place to place and puppet them, living life as if nothing had really changed. Looking at where those stains had settled I saw a clear pattern emerge. He had put them to bed. He had set them dinner. He had propped them up to watch TV, or gave them their favorite books. They even sat there as lifeless husks while Daniel waited for them to complete a fucking jigsaw. The idea horrified me to my core. Back to work. It's obviously not part of the original designs. No room on the other side, not on the blueprints. Elliot didn't believe me, and why would he? I made every inch of this place, but I did not install that door and storage on the bottom level. I checked the cameras and some of the photos I took during the build, and the wall is just blank. But the door is there now and it must lead somewhere. I don't know when or why it opens, but it does, and the next time I'll be ready. Because I have to know what's on the other side, and why it did this to us. Alone down here, often all asleep at once. Anything could have slit our throats and been done with it. But it didn't. It took its time, and I have to know why. It took our radios and computers and phones. One by one. None of us noticing until it was far too late. I kept telling the kids they needed to take better care of their things, and even as they complained I just assumed the phones were lying behind some shelf. Where else could they go in a locked bunker? But it wasn't the children at all. Looking back, there are so many signs. Who kept taking away the lights? Who kept draining the batteries in our torches? How long did we live with it before we finally realized we weren't alone? Was it here every step of the way? A door out of nothing that leads to nowhere, at least most of the time. Because I know for a fact it does not always open onto a blank wall. There is something behind it. I can hear it shuffling around in there, wet breath rattling in its lungs, a horrible sound I hear roaming these halls when it thinks I'm asleep. I listened to Daniel, fascinated by this strangely compelling rant, when movement caught my eye. An infrared camera running in the dark, its image a roiling mess of uniform noise. What was it I'd seen? I paused the tape and rewound. Squinting, I saw 2 pinpricks of light in the darkness just over Daniel's shoulder. Slowly, the image resolved itself in my mind. I knew what I was seeing and it turned my blood to ice. Miranda Vance had turned her head, and her lifeless eyes glowed as she fixed them on the back of Daniel's head. Not even any point leaving at this stage. I'm no doctor, but that door is giving off enough radiation to, well, to kill a family of 7. If none of us had touched it. Being in the same room is risky, but not lethal. But given how sick we've become, it's pretty obvious our curiosity got the better of us, one by one, and we all got too close. Or maybe not. Maybe that thing on the other side came through and did this. I don't even wait, what was that? I became painfully aware of my position relative to the table and I had the painful premonition that if I turned, those chairs would not be empty. I would see the Vances, all of them, Daniel as well, waiting for me. Heads turned. Bodies left to rot for years in the dark. Behind me something shifted. It breathed. Loud. Quick. I knew what it was. I knew. It came at me so fast that when I felt something hot and wet touch my hand I screamed, only for the presence to suddenly recoil. But then, without hesitation, it leapt at me and bore me to the ground. I wept as Ripley licked my face. He was shivering and, worst of all, silent, which was not normal. He was not a quiet dog, not when greeting me and not when excited like he was now. But whatever he'd seen down here, he clung to me and dug his paws into my shoulders like he wanted to be cradled over the shoulder, something he has been too big to do for years. I picked him up, straining a little under the weight but refusing to give in to tired muscles, and made for the ladder. It wasn't easy climbing the 3 or 4 rungs to the hatch, but I managed it and gave the hatch a shove. First one hand, then 2. Again and again, with everything I had, but still that hatch refused to budge. The door. I went down quietly. At first I considered leaving Ripley behind, but after losing him the first time I decided I'd rather risk it just to know that he was right next to me. Besides, he was being quieter than I was, and I didn't feel much like going down those stairs on my own. He accompanied me with only the quiet click-clack of his paws on concrete, a sound I found deeply comforting as I barely managed to keep my torch from shaking in my hand and my breathing steady. Something moved in the darkness, out there in the twisted jungle of shadows cast by all those pipes and wires that ran from one machine to the next. A figure moved. Thin, but unmistakably human in its outline. I couldn't help but remember what I'd seen on that tape. Surely it couldn't have been real. Maybe Daniel had rigged something up. Some fishing wire and a motor, maybe. The idea that those bodies had been moving on their own. I couldn't be sure of that, could I? It was a frightening idea, one my mind had latched onto out of sheer panic. That was all. And then I saw them. A pair of white pinpricks reflecting back at me from the depths of that cluttered room. Ripley, already behind me, had nuzzled into my leg, pushed even closer against me and let out a barely audible whine under his breath. The behavior of a dog who was terrified, close to pissing himself with fear. I ran straight to the stairs and went to climb them, but only 1 or 2 steps in and I saw something gripping the handrail on the top floor. A moldy clump of flesh only just recognizable as a fist, the flesh withered until the fingers were basically bone. Without meaning to, I brought my light up out of habit and I saw the bloated face of a hairless corpse glaring down at me. I couldn't even tell you if it had been a teenage girl or the 60-year-old Daniel. Either way, I instinctively turned and found another body shambling towards me out of the workshop. I was trapped. Nowhere to go. By the feel of warm fluid on the back of my leg, I could tell Ripley had finally pissed himself. An adult dog, tail between his legs, shivering like a puppy and desperate to be picked up. God, I needed him to just stay together for a little longer. I couldn't take him in my arms, but I couldn't leave him behind either. With nowhere to go, I ran down and entered storage. There was the temptation to stop once I hit the bottom. Down here the air was thicker and the sounds of my breathing were muted, somehow distant. But I only had to look back up to see 3 pairs of eyes glaring down at me, so without giving any of it much further thought, I barreled down the corridor and stumbled onto a door at random. Opening it, I saw what looked like your standard storage room, only most of the shelves had been overturned and the food left to rot on the floor. 1 or 2 shelving units were still upright though, and their shelves were covered in tall opaque boxes that made them a fantastic hiding spot. That, I decided, would have to be where I crouched down and turned off my light. I was already inside when I realized that wasn't all that was in there. The door almost looked normal. I could see why Daniel must have been confused by it, because it looked a little bit like all the other doors down there, but it was different too. It was too tall and too wide, about 1.5 feet off the ground, and the metal rusted in its entirety like it had aged out of sync with everything else down there. All around the jam was a profusion of wet soppy moss like the kind you find hanging off trees in a swamp, and every few seconds the door would leak something strange and oily, like the kind of thing you find in a parking lot on a rainy day. Of course that wasn't too strange in itself, but the leak was horizontal, defying gravity, so that every few seconds a large glob of the stuff would whip across the room and slap into the wall opposite, creating a puddle about the size of a man that defied all reason. Remembering Daniel's words about radiation, I instinctively inched away from this puddle and the door on the opposite wall, backing myself into the darkest, quietest corner I could while I pulled Ripley behind me and hoped to hell he wouldn't give me away. Once I was in there, I turned off my light and waited. I must have taken longer than I'd thought to hide Spot, because it was barely 2 seconds later when a few figures entered the room. It was pitch black after I'd turned off my torch, but they made enough noise to let me know that at least 2 of them had stumbled in after me. I stayed there, unable to see anything, not sure if they were heading straight for me or just getting ready to leave, forced to hold out and let luck decide my fate. When I finally heard something scrape against the wall barely 2 feet from where I stood, I gave up and switched my light on, desperate to know what was coming for me. Daniel Vance was no more than 6 inches from my face. This voice wasn't Daniel's. I couldn't say for sure, but it sounded like a child's whisper. One by one the bodies shuffled over to the open door and knelt before it. I don't know why, but I got the impression the others had lost pretty much everything left of their minds, but Daniel remained aware. He looked back at me once more and spoke before he pressed his head to the floor in supplication with the others. And then something reached through the door and gripped his head in its palm the way you or I might pick up an apple. In full panic, I ran over and grabbed my dog and the bolt cutters, and I ran like my legs were pistons, machines whose signals of exhaustion and fatigue could not slow me down, or cause me to fall. I had to move. I had to leave. The hand that had grabbed Daniel, the sight of it flushed my mind clean like some kind of enema. It hurt to see the image replay in my mind, but there was nothing else in my head echoing around except the sight of fingers with one too many knuckles, and nails as large as a smartphone. I reached the top floor and nearly collapsed from breathlessness, but I wouldn't let myself stay down for long. I crawled over to the ladder and climbed up and immediately went to work trying to cut the metal lock. It was hell with just one hand, the other clinging to the torch that I kept frantically pointing at the door behind me, and it wasn't long before I fumbled one too many times and dropped my only source of light. No, 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 I mewed. But there was no time to look for it. I had to get out, and I had to get out fast. I couldn't see, but I was sure I could hear something climbing up those stairs. Not the steady thump-thump of human feet. No, this was different. This was a rapid pitter-patter of a spider, maybe. Something with hundreds of feet or hands, or God knows what, skittering along the floor and walls and ceiling, pulling itself along with a body whose mere shape would offend God. For a few seconds I drifted in and out of consciousness, but when I looked up and saw the canopy overhead moving, the branches backlit by a full moon, I snapped awake and glared down at something gripping my ankle. The hand had reached out of the dark and seized me and was slowly dragging me back into the earth below. Whatever it was, most of its body lurked out of sight in the shadows behind the doorway, but the hand that crushed my leg was the size of my torso with an arm that looked like it belonged to a mole rat. I wept like a child, feeling like my mind was slowly cracking as I tried everything to stop that fucking pulling me into the shadows. I kicked at the earth. I dug into it using my hands looking for a root or a pipe or anything to hold on to. Nothing I did would slow it down. I wasted no time waiting or looking or processing. I heaved the dog to my chest and crawled until I passed out, making it maybe half a kilometer away. Only when I could no longer see the door did I let myself fall to the ground face first and gave up consciousness. / I've moved since then. Couldn't help it. It wasn't just the memories you see. It was the shortwave radio I kept in my basement. Something my father passed on to me when I was just a boy. God, I'd forgotten about it, at least until I woke up one day to the sound of it blaring white noise down in the dark. Let them go, 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 let them go.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I went down the disturbing internet content rabbit hole and never came back, by Chris Burton author. Secretly watching Courage the Cowardly Dog on TV as a child did give me the chills, but at the same time, I had to realize that it scratched an itch in my brain I had not known needed scratching. I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. It sure as hell gave me several sleepless nights, yet I always seemed to return for more. My parents had forbidden me from watching such scary nonsense, but I always found a way to get some spookiness into my system. We believed it was cool to watch horror movies. I guess it filled us with some sort of pride to have witnessed good old Jason Voorhees in a hockey mask stab and slash and mutilate the poor people, so we'd gather at one of our places in the evenings to stare at demons and ghosts and unsolicited violence and unexpected jump scares and scenes of comically exaggerated bloodbath. It was fun, though for me, the fun didn't stop there. At one point, I began to crave more of the substance. After a while, I started to watch movies on my own from time to time. Not many at first, just here and there, maybe 1 or 2 films every week. Then, of course, it got more frequent. I wasn't fully aware of it, but the dark world of terrifying imagery began to consume me in a way I found exciting. My eyes were open to a whole new underground universe that had been existing right below our feet, hiding slightly out of sight for the average person. Of course, it took a few days to chew well and digest fully, but afterwards, it wasn't that much of a surprise to find that I was already ready for more. I felt like I was back on track. I created a new list of all the banned and controversial shock movies I wanted to watch, then began to scrape my way through, starting from the more well-known titles, Salo, Martyrs, Cannibal Holocaust, the Poughkeepsie Tapes, and so on, you name them. Around that time, I became aware of a new, unfamiliar, and unusual feeling that would creep up on me occasionally. Every now and then, I would find myself trying to avoid the strange impression that the world around me somehow seemed a little more colorless than usual. A bit more gray. Numb. Lifeless. Most of the time, this feeling just came, took its time and then passed by, and even though I found it weird, it didn't bother me as much to take it seriously. Looking back now, it should have been an obvious warning sign that I was heading in a direction no one should be. From the relatively well-known banned shock movies, I moved on to the Asian obscure ones, like that Japanese film series with hamster in their titles. No, it was guinea pig. Regardless, I think that was where I crossed the line for good. There are no words I could use to describe all the shit, sometimes literally, I put my brain through. I won't even try. But, of course, eventually, I got used to the substance again. The fake piss and blood and vomit and tears and stomach acid and God knows what else no longer gave me the thrills I needed to thrive. Yet again, it was time to up my dose. I had to take another step up, or rather, down. I knew I was about to cross into possibly illegal territory, or gray, at best, so, to play it safe, the first thing I did was to download a VPN application on my laptop to mask my IP address and conceal my location. Real gore, I typed into the search bar. There were several promising shock sites to pick from, and I knew none of them, so I chose randomly. 20 minutes later, I had to run to the toilet to puke. I took a day off, and then I returned. I always did. Beheadings, cold-blooded murders committed with hammers and ice picks, recorded with shitty telephones, body dismemberment, animal cruelty, necrophilia, do I need to go on? I'd seen it all. Yet again, in a month or so, it was no longer enough. Of course, the answer to how was evident, so I installed a specific internet browser recommended for activities like the one I was about to indulge in. Everything went way too smoothly, and even though I was thrilled that I could successfully connect to the dark web without any hassle, it was both mind-blowing and deeply concerning to see how easily accessible all these indescribably abhorrent photos and videos, and basically anything else you can or can't think of, were. A quick Google search and there you had several articles and forum posts describing everything about the setup and connection process in great detail. You would install some stuff, click here, then type something there, and you're good, you can go on and enjoy your videos of things you should never watch. So, in like 20 minutes, I was in. You'd think you know what to expect, but believe me, you have absolutely no idea. The things I'd witnessed there were way more mindless, sickening, loathsome, and most importantly, real. These videos were actual recordings of true human degeneracy and vileness. I crawled deep into the snuff film rabbit hole. For some of these, it was very obvious that the creators had an actual budget to work with because, despite the gnarly subject matter, many had a relatively good production quality to them. Jesus fucking Christ, people pay to watch this shit, I thought at first. I was absolutely sure that paying for content like this was a line I'd never cross. I would never be able to do such a thing. And I hadn't, until I did too. One day, I was browsing around in the endless maze of dark web links when I came across a site that advertised offers of different kinds of live experiences. It caught my attention right away. I read through them, then started to think, then consider. Am I in this deep? I asked myself. Well, it certainly looks like I am, I figured. And I was right. I scrolled through the list of these offers. Many of the options I saw made it sound like the live experience could potentially end with the customer dead in the process. Weird fetish, but that's not what I wanted. I didn't necessarily want to kill myself, so I chose one which was said to be beginner level. Based on its description, the danger would be real, but I'd also have a good chance of escaping the situation intact. According to this advertisement, the point of the game was that you, the customer, had to escape from a forest on the outskirts of the city, my city, while being chased by an unarmed, middle-aged, and average-built man, this is important, who was out for your life, or at least acted like he was. It wasn't that expensive either, though I wasn't sure if the chaser would actually kill the customer or if it was just a marketing strategy. All things considered, it promised a moderately difficult, achievable, yet dangerous and intense experience. I closed my laptop and pretended to think about it for an hour, and then, of course, I ended up visiting the site again and signed up. The day came suddenly, and that night I decided to leave my apartment around 11 p.m., ensuring I'd arrive at the given location about 20 minutes before the appointed time of 1 a.m. because I wanted to have some extra time on my own to have a look around at the terrain and to prepare myself as much as one possibly can in a situation like this. I took the subway, then after many stops I switched to a bus, then disembarked again about 30 minutes later. I was glad no one approached me on public transport, because in my nervousness and excitement, I probably wouldn't have been able to give a coherent response. At last, I walked an extra few kilometers towards my destination, leaving all the city lights behind. When I got to the edge of the forest, I took my phone out and double-checked the GPS coordinates, making sure I was at the correct spot. I couldn't think clearly. I was restless, shaking, and scared. I looked at the time on my phone, still had 15 minutes until 1 a.m. I glanced around, then quickly decided to move about 50 meters away from the woods and onto the field, giving myself plenty of free space to ensure I wouldn't be caught off guard. 10, he shouted with a hoarse but thin-sounding voice. As per the rules, he kept holding his hands in the air. 9, 8, 7. A choking wave of nausea washed over me. Sweat began to run down my spine. The blood in my veins started to rush at an uncontrollable speed. 5, 4, he continued, sounding increasingly worked up. No, fuck. 1, 0, he shouted, dropping his hands and taking no time to begin marching towards me with quick, agitated steps. The rustling noises grew louder and louder, and then halted at once. He was now standing somewhere on the other side of the tree I was hiding behind. I was sure he didn't know I was there, otherwise, he would have jumped at me right away, and I couldn't have done anything to save myself, so I waited for him to walk past. When he appeared a few meters in front of me, I grabbed the hammer I had been hiding under my coat, rushed up to him from behind, giving him no time to turn around, and bashed the hammer into his hoodie-covered head. Crack. The sound of the impact was nasty. With a loud, painful and startled yell, he collapsed immediately, falling forward, and the color of his blue hoodie began darkening around the point of impact, the blood stain spreading through the textile fibers. He begged me to stop and told me I had won, but I knew I hadn't. Not yet. I should have turned back right then and there, but I didn't. There was no stopping now. The hammer came down again and again, leaving a horrible fucking mess in its wake. I should have stopped and walked away, but I couldn't. I had never known when to stop.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
Growing up, I thought everyone had a second family in their basement. In retrospect, I understand how ridiculous that sounds, but it was all I'd ever known. I knew that each Christmas, he'd bring a sack of brightly wrapped packages downstairs in a Santa suit. I knew that my dad had a second family in the basement, and it seemed so normal that I thought everyone else did too. I'll never forget the first time I asked my mom about them. I was young, maybe 5, when I finally found the words to ask, "Mommy, why can't I play with the people in the basement?" I'll never forget that, as that question hung in the air, she finally stopped for the first time. Her stillness was unsettling in a way I can't quite explain. After that night, everything was different. My dad only tented the leftovers after dinner, only brought the food downstairs after I'd gone to bed. He stopped visiting them in the mornings altogether. My mom started acting differently, too. I'd always noticed that she was distant from my dad, had always noticed how she bristled under his touch, how she stole away to the other side of the room whenever he entered. But it got worse after that. As a kid, I felt deeply guilty. I felt like I'd ruined my parents' marriage. But I was just a kid, and I was curious. My mom meant to dissuade me from asking more questions, but she accidentally gave away something that made me even more curious, the downstairs family had kids, maybe kids my own age to play with. I needed to know about them, in the way that little kids need to understand all of the strangeness of this chaotic world, need to make sense of the nonsense that surrounds us daily. The nonsense that we become acclimated to as adults but struggle with endlessly as children, like a puzzle or a riddle or a word problem on a math test about buying 80 watermelons. And then, I knocked. I jumped when a gentle knock returned from the other side. It was almost immediate, like the person on the other side had been waiting for me. The thought froze me in place for a moment, but I knew I didn't have time to waste. My mouth felt suddenly of sandpaper and chalk, but I leaned into the door to whisper, "Hi. I am Ricky. What's your name?" She replied simply, as if the entire situation felt as wholly normal for her as it had for me, on the opposite side of the basement door. "Daddy comes to visit sometimes, though, so I guess there's 4. And why wasn't she allowed to come out of the basement? And at home, I had Lila. I'm ashamed to admit this, but, eventually, I couldn't manage the guilt I felt for living the life Lila never had, could never have in my mind. I was so young, so naive. I didn't know how to manage the situation anymore, so I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped trying. I stopped visiting Lila. No more secret, whispered exchanges, no more quick knocks on the door just to let her know that I was there, that anyone at all was there for her. Days and weeks and months and years trickled by with Lila never quite leaving my thoughts, but with her existence instead, compartmentalized. I hopped on my bike and didn't come home until dinner was on the table. She wasn't persuaded, though, and her knocking only grew more frequent, and louder. I was about 10 years old by then, so I had a little more freedom, all the freedom in the world, compared to Lila. I avoided my house at all costs, only returning in the evenings, where I'd be greeted immediately by the knocking. By then, it was less knocking and more ramming the total weight of her body into the door. My mother took to vacuuming the house obsessively just to cover up the noise. She wouldn't even look my dad in the eye anymore. I imagined the bruises blooming on Lila's shoulder, up and down the length of her arm. If it hurt her, she didn't let on. Sleep became a distant memory, leaving me dazed and irritable and confused and, most of all, terrified. I began showing up at my schoolfriends', now my only friends', house unannounced just to escape Lila's knocking. His parents clearly didn't like me, and tensions rose between the two of us kids, escalating to a boiling point that ended in a fight. I slugged him in the gut, and he returned with the words that broke me, broke everything. I had to gather the courage to, once again, ask a difficult question, "Mom, am I a bastard?" About how they couldn't have known, but about the guilt she carried regardless, like a heavy backpack, Mom. I found out later that evening, when my dad came home from work and unlocked the door. Lila came out of the shadows, and I flinched instinctively as I saw her face for the first time, saw the gaping hole in her face where her left eye should have been. Isaac was little like Lila said, but the oozing wound to his jaw would have made it nearly impossible for him to speak if he had the chance to grow up. My dad's second family still stayed inside, but they were no longer confined to the shadows of the basement after that day. They became less of my dad's second family as we all became one larger family that laughed and played and loved together. I don't live in that house anymore. I'm an adult now, with an enormous appreciation for all of the freedom and opportunities available to me that I once took for granted. I know my family is far from normal, even horrible and horrifying in many ways that I helped to perpetuate as a kid, but it's all I've ever known. I love them, all of them. I still visit whenever I can, for birthdays and for Christmas and for summer vacations. And whenever I do visit, I take a moment to be grateful for the fact that when I knock on the front door, Lila opens it.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock, knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
I was halfway through unpacking when they called. 2 years retired, and I still jumped whenever my phone rang. Bad habits from a bad career, I guess. But this call didn't come from any number I recognized. Just a scrambled string of digits and a voice I hadn't heard since my last debriefing. Then the line cut. I stood in the silence for a long minute, staring at the wall. I had never seen a pale-weight clearance in action, only in redacted files and whispered rumors. A global extinction-level protocol. The kind of thing you think is theoretical. Until it isn't. 3 hours later, I was on a boat with one bag and a name I hadn't spoken in over a decade. The air was thick with salt and something colder than sea wind. The fog started early and the island didn't show up on any chart. Everyone in the order knows the lighthouse eventually. The boat was small. Inside, just me, the pilot and a few covered crates tied down under a tarp. I tried to start a conversation once or twice, but the man at the wheel didn't speak. He looked like he'd been doing this route his whole life. Calm, detached from reality. Probably former order himself. They don't use civilians for deliveries like this, only trusted personnel. After a while, I gave up on small talk and stared out into the fog. It was thick enough to make the horizon disappear. There were no waves or sound, just the hum of the engine and a cold pressure in my chest that didn't seem to disappear. It's strange what the mind clings to when there's nothing to distract it, isn't it? I didn't think back to the missions or subjects I encountered. Neither to the briefings printed in red ink and sealed in wax. Not even the containment breaches. I thought about Ellis. He taught me everything I know today, how to survive, thrive in the order. How to handle the silence. How to recognize when something is watching, not with eyes, but with intent. And now, they're sending me to the lighthouse, the one that needs supervision at all times. The one no one leaves. I wondered, not for the first time, if Ellis ended up there. Am I now being sent to remote observation like he was? Does that mean he died there, and am I going to? There was no dock, just a black stone slick with algae and a rusted metal ladder bolted to the side. The boatman said nothing when I looked at him. He just pointed up. I climbed in silence, cold wind bit at my knuckles and the ocean below was too still. I half expected to hear waves or gulls, but there was only the slap of wet boots against the ladder. The lighthouse. It stood like a monolith swallowed in fog. Old stonework patched with rusted plates. Its glass eye was dark, the metal housing around it cracked and weather-torn. I didn't wait for a welcome. I heard a dull clang from above me. Then a wet, dragging noise, like something was being pulled out of the water. I froze, one hand on the stair rail and waited. Nothing. Whatever had made the noise, it was gone now. Or never there at all, I'm not sure. He hadn't aged much. Or, more precisely, not in the way you'd expect after over a decade. His beard had been white before he vanished. Just deeper lines now. After a solemn prayer, I looked down at the open page of the logbook. The last entry was scrawled in a hand I remembered from field reports and briefing memos. I closed the book and stepped back. Above me, the light remained off. I felt the fog pressing against the glass, waiting to be let in. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed near the main corridor, checking the glass on the upper levels every hour, watching the fog. Seeing if they come closer. Movement. Not physical or measurable, just a shift in the fog. The same way you feel a figure behind you in a mirror. Or a shape beneath the ice. God knows I know a lot about this. It circled the entire tower with pressure. Each time the structure creaked, I tensed. Each time the hallway lights flickered, I reached for the wrench propped beside the panel. Eventually, the backup batteries began to fail. A low warning tone echoed up the stairwell, before humming. One light at a time, click, 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 backslash, the emergency corridor went dark. Then I saw the cables. Coiled around the base of the generator. Slick, black and wrapped around the entire room like roots. They throbbed, not electrically, but organically. I stepped closer, aiming to inspect them. The cables twitched ever so slightly, a rhythmic throb. I didn't know what they were. But I know what they weren't ours. Something had grown them. Or invited them. The light hadn't failed, it had been cut off. But keep it at bay. This place wasn't meant to contain anything, it wasn't a simple order structure like a facility. And someone, something, had found a way to interfere. If I restarted the generator, I might trigger something worse. A feedback surge, blowout, or in the worst case, a containment breach. I counted backwards from 5. Upstairs, the beacon housing cracked. A low tone rumbled through the walls. I reached the main terminal. Then twice. Then the light came on. It wasn't gentle, it struck, like the beam sliced through the fog with a scalpel. Something like a distortion. A fold in the world that shouldn't be there. For a second it looked like a ship, then a face, then me. I don't know what it was, but I know it saw me. And the light kept spinning. And since then, it never stopped. I made sure it wouldn't. Because who else could they send? I closed the logbook. No ceremony or orders like they usually do. Just the truth. Coming straight from Ellis. The fabric fit like it had always been mine. The fog hasn't thickened since. And I've been here for quite some time now. The order hasn't called and they won't. That was my last conversation with them, they made sure of it. They sent someone who wouldn't let the world burn. It's me.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
I died for 6 minutes in 2003. Heaven Isn't What We Think It Is, by Dr. Terrifying. With apologies to the religious, I feel my story must be shared. In 2003, when I was 15 years old, my heart stopped for 6 minutes. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, at the point in my daily routine when I walked home from the bus stop. In the 4 blocks between the corner where I hopped off the bus and my front door, I started to feel nauseous. It came on suddenly, without warning. I'd felt just fine all day, ate a lunch of Bosco sticks and marinara sauce, something I'd eaten hundreds of times throughout high school. Before I had an opportunity to consider alternative causes, I broke out in a cold sweat. Then I felt the curious flutter in my chest. I became breathless and collapsed. What happened next has been told to me after the fact. I apparently sprawled in the road, where a woman driving a hatchback nearly crushed my skull beneath her tires. Instead, she screeched to a halt, tried to rouse me, then dialed emergency services when she failed to do so. EMS arrived to discover my heart had stopped beating. I was dead, technically. They transported my body to the hospital, and somewhere along the way managed to shock my ticker back to life. Thus began a harrowing weeks-long journey through the American healthcare system that led eventually to an ablation, pacemaker, and mountains of debt my family's still dealing with. It began with light. Blinding, white, pervasive. It bathed me, calmed me. It was everything they tell you about. Beatific, welcoming, the stuff of spiritual experiences. In any event, I arrived in a place without dimension, a place beyond reality. It only made sense while I occupied it. I don't believe a corporeal being can make sense of the astral plane, something about its intangible existence defies translation. So what I came away with were more impressions than images. I was not alone. Several life forces enclosed me upon my arrival. At first, because of my Christian upbringing, I believed them to be angels. In my incorporeal form, I made the spiritually equivalent gesture of opening my arms, anticipating their embrace. Something like laughter returned, but it was cold, mocking. Thoughts floated into my consciousness like birds winging in and out of sight. They delivered some horrifying truths about existence that I'll do my best to relay to you now. Our universe, like many others running parallel to it, contains a pittance of the total energy in existence. It is a farm, used to produce souls, which only arise in the precise conditions found in our cosmos. When you hear scientists talk about the improbability of the existence of our Goldilocks universe, it's because they don't actually come into being spontaneously. They're designed. And the hands that craft them are not benevolent gods, but rapacious beings with little care for the creatures they create. Our ultimate purpose, I learned in the custody of the spirits that shackled me, was to ripen until we were ready to serve them on their higher plane. 6 minutes in heaven felt like a lifetime, which I spent amusing what I perceived to be a childlike spirit with a penchant for psychologically distressing manipulation. It batted me around like a cat with a caught mouse, reveling in the pain it produced. Physical discomforts we imagine hell inflicting upon us pale in comparison to the torture of soul pain. Loss of a loved one comes closest, that piercing, emotional damage resulting from trauma. When it became clear my time had not yet expired on Earth and I was to return, I was told not to reveal their existence to the rest of my kind. My reward, they communicated to me, would be a marginally improved station among the slave population. Alternatively, if I managed to convince others of their existence, new horrors would await me when I returned. I gave up trying to convince them. This was a few years later, when the author of a non-fiction book recounting their near-death experience visited my hometown. I won't reveal the author's name as I don't want to invite a lawsuit, which I'm sure he'd launch against me if he read that I'd besmirched him. I attended a reading and afterward confronted him about his tale. I looked him in the eye and asked if he really met God, something I'm sure he's dealt with hundreds of times. He smiled and nodded, assuring me that yes, God is real and is filled with love. On a lark, I decided to tell him that I knew the truth, that slavery awaits us all.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
The Homeless in My Neighborhood Don't Just Want Change, by Mr. Frontenac. I'm not mad about the process anymore, although it left me questioning where society was headed. We felt at home quick, and while there were some shocks, we made games out of them to take the fear away. With the pops that permeated the night, we had the game where we guessed whether the sound was fireworks or gunshots. When we passed large turds, one of us would point and we played. There was a homeless problem there for sure, but they minded their own business. Our neighbors seemed to see right through them. They'd act as if they were ghosts. Like they weren't even there. Hell, everyone did. I walked by the trash without touching it and opened the back door. "What do you want?" I stepped forward to try and show I wasn't scared, but it was the tepid step of prey, like I was better planting my weight to run. The man said nothing. I composed myself and yelled, "This is private property. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." Now this was the emptiest of threats, and everybody in the neighborhood knew it. The cops made a point to show up an hour late if at all. The man walked forward a few paces to where I could see him better. He was very tall and wore a heavy wool overcoat that stretched all the way to his ankles. He stopped just in front of me. A white scar starred across his black skin just below the chin. He was at least 6'6", but the coat that ran the entire length of his body made him gigantic. His face was recently shaven and gaunt. He held out his fist at arm's length, and when he uncurled his fingers, cupped in his enormous palm was a pill. "You want me to take it?" I pointed at his hand, but still his expression was static. "No, no." One of them was waving me back. "You talking about a really big motherfucker?" The man raised his hand to signify. "Yay, hi. Black coat. Nasty scars." "Yeah." I nodded. "Well, that's Tall Frank. What you wanna about him? You see him in your recycling?" "Weird how? Was he just looking like his weird self?" Both of their brows rose. "You saying that Tall Frank tried to communicate with you?" "Yeah. He cut his own throat to never talk again." The other chimed in. "If he doesn't communicate with anyone, how come he has the name Tall Frank?" They both shrugged. "No clue. But you be sure to tell us when you find out." They bent back to their work, and I thanked them and went on, far less assured than when I'd first set out. //////. I was obsessed, and it wasn't long before I saw him again. I was wrapped in a blanket filling the teapot at the sink when I saw him standing in the same place as before. "Hey." My head felt light, and I was in that same kind of drunken state where your fear hardly speaks to you. I scampered through the backyard over to him. "What do you want with me?" Tall Frank was staring at me. He gestured with his scarred neck for me to follow. I stepped cautiously after him. When I got past the bushes where I could see the alley, I saw him standing near the trash cans. He reached into his breast pocket and paused before pulling out an envelope. Then he put the letter in his other hand and reached in again and pulled out another. He extended the envelopes to me, his long arm nearly stretched the entire alley. I approached the letters cautiously, snatching them and stepping back. It was a handwritten letter on college-ruled paper. All the ink was smeared like it had been dunked in water, but I could still read it, albeit slowly. When I was done reading, I let my arm fall down to my side and stared at Tall Frank in disbelief. Angie had a lover. The letterhead read, "Atlantic Life Insurance." The pills. I thought about the empty capsule he'd shown me that I tossed aside. It was my emergency albuterol. It had to be. A quick WebMD search showed that an overdose started with symptoms of headaches and heart palpitations. Angie is trying to kill me. Suddenly I realized Tall Frank's arm was around me and he was patting my shoulder paternally. We sat there in silence for a long time. "Honey, are you out here?" Angie called. "I made you some tea."
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I found a hidden door in my house. I should have left it alone, by Random Questions 27296. And yeah, the price was low. suspiciously low. I figured there had to be something structurally wrong. Cracked foundation, water damage, something buried in the inspection report. But it all came back clean, and I was too desperate to pass it up. If the walls caved in later, fine, at least they'd be my walls. The realtor was cagey about the previous owner. Just said the house had been sitting for a while, and that the guy who lived here left it behind. Whatever that meant. I didn't ask. I just wanted out of my old apartment, paper-thin walls, loud neighbors, and a ceiling that leaked every time it rained. This place felt like freedom. Then the knocking started. It happened on the third night. I was just drifting off when I heard it, 3 sharp knocks against the wall behind my bed. Not fast, not frantic. Just 3 deliberate taps. Then nothing. I tried to ignore it. Told myself it was just old insulation. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The kind of wrong you don't want to name. There was this old wardrobe left behind by the previous owner. Heavy. Outdated. It didn't match anything else in the house. I hadn't touched it until then. But when I dragged it away from the wall, I found something. It was hidden behind the wardrobe, flush with the wall and painted the same dull off-white. No handle. Just a rusted keyhole and a bent latch, like someone had tried to break it open. Or maybe keep it shut. The stairs creaked under my weight. Narrow, uneven steps led down into thick, stale air. Every breath tasted like mold, metal, and something sour. The air didn't just smell, it clung to my skin. The space below didn't match the house. It extended farther than it should have. The walls were concrete but covered in peeling wallpaper, like someone had tried to make it feel less like a basement and more like a room. But it didn't feel lived in. It felt buried. And then I saw the scratches. On the inside of the door, deep, frantic gouges in the wood. Long marks, uneven, like someone with bare fingers or maybe nails had tried to claw their way out. My stomach dropped. I didn't go any further. I couldn't. I felt watched. Not the "someone's in the room" kind of watched. Something older. Worse. Like the room itself was breathing, and I'd just stepped inside its lungs. But that night, the whispering started. It was the voice she had in the hospital, after the cancer spread to her throat. Raspy. Wet. The way she sounded just before she died. I tried to convince myself it was stress. A sleep-deprived hallucination. But then I saw the wardrobe. It had moved. I left my phone recording on the nightstand. In the morning, I played it back. 2 hours in, the audio glitched. The file distorted into high-pitched static. But right before that, just for a second, I heard my mother's voice. But there she was, whispering, "You left me down here." I lit a candle to test it. The flame bent sideways, like something invisible was breathing right next to it. Around midnight, the lights started flickering. Not all at once, one room at a time. First the kitchen. Then the hallway. Then the lamp next to me. The house buzzed like it was breathing through the wires. It opened by itself. Violently. Slammed against the wall and stayed there. The light inside was off. The compressor wasn't running. Just dead. I pressed my ear to the drywall, and I swear I heard footsteps. Bare feet dragging slowly across the wood just behind the plaster. And then, laughter. When I finally forced myself back into the house, I went straight to the guest room. Inside, the staircase now went down far deeper than it had before. It was almost like the house had grown underneath itself. I stood there staring at it, my feet frozen to the floor. I didn't go down. Not yet. But I was going to. Something was trapped down there once. Someone locked it away. Whatever they did to contain it, I need to understand. Because if I don't stop it, if I don't learn how to seal it again, I fear what it will do to me. I should have waited until daylight. I should have told someone. Or left. Or burned the house down. But instead, I went down at night. Like an idiot. I thought if I could figure out how they trapped it, I could stop it, or at least survive. I wasn't curious. I was desperate. I brought my mom's old crucifix. The wardrobe was still shoved aside. I hadn't moved it since the door behind it was found wide open. The air pouring out was worse now. Wet, cold, and sour, like mildew and old meat. The kind of air that clings to your clothes and sinks into your lungs. By the time I hit the bottom, I felt like I'd sunk through the floor of reality. I don't know if it was the same room as before. The shape was similar, concrete walls, no windows, no furniture, but the carvings in the floor were gone. Just torn up gouges like something had violently scraped them away. I stepped forward. The flashlight dimmed to almost nothing. The crucifix scorched my palm, I dropped it. It hit the floor, slid to the edge of the dirt and stopped. Then it rose. It wore my sister's mouth. My mom's eyes. My father's jaw. All overlapping, stretched over skin that was too thin. The more it mimicked, the more it unraveled. Every movement looked like it was guessing how people worked, a bad imitation of being alive. Every loss I'd ever felt, it played back. Every cruel word I ever said. Every time I looked away while someone I loved was dying. It didn't invent pain, it just sharpened what was already there. Then it came at me. It didn't lunge. It didn't run. They found me face down on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. Unconscious. Barely breathing. Covered in cuts and bruises. They said my body was freezing. If anyone reading this knows anything, please help me. This constant whispering is driving me fucking insane.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
He Gets Thirsty and I Broke the Rules, by Ad Blake. I should have known something was wrong with the place the moment the landlord refused to show it himself. But I figured, hey, it's a cheap studio you can rent by the month, so he probably just doesn't want to waste his time entertaining every John or Adam that breezes through. So, I let my uneasiness slide, signed for the place via email, and told him I'd be by to pick up the keys in the morning, and to this he agreed. This must be what the landlord was talking about, I said aloud to myself, stepping towards the door to inspect it. As I approached, I felt a faint draft leak from the crack beneath it, carrying with it the smell of something cool and sour. I pressed my ear to its surface, the metal and unwelcoming feeling against my cheek. I held my breath expecting the sounds from my worst nightmares to greet my ears, but instead, nothing. There was only a slight hiss that was probably nothing more than the air blowing in through the vents. He told me not to pay any mind to it, so I'm not going to. It's locked up because it's a maintenance-only thing, I bet. There's probably duct entrances and water heater access back there that I don't need to bother with. At least, that's what I thought until the note arrived. I had barely been settled into the place for a week when I got it. It was slipped under my door covertly, with no sign as to who had been its deliverer. Scrawled in a messy hand on a torn-up piece of notebook paper, the message read, "He gets thirsty. Blue cup only. Don't speak. Don't listen. Don't touch. And sitting, situated just so, on top of my bookshelf was a blue plastic cup. It looked like the kind you'd find in an old diner or forgotten in the back of a kitchen cabinet, the kind of cup that never seems to disappear, no matter how often you move, lightweight and a little scuffed, its once vivid color dulled by years of use and dishwasher cycles, slightly translucent with a seam running down one side from the molding process, nothing special. It had a few tiny nicks along its otherwise smooth rim. Picking it up made me feel oddly nostalgic, like it belonged in a childhood memory. It was sturdy and unremarkable and utterly terrifying. The more I stared, the more I noticed about this thing hunched on the floor. He looked unfinished, like he had been sculpted from wax and left too close to a fire. Those thin, long limbs looked like they had been built for crawling, not walking, and every joint seemed hyperextended, like he had been folded up in this tight, dark place for years. He was hairless, no eyebrows or lashes, even, and his skin glistened, damp with sweat. I slowly backed out of the closet, not taking my eyes off of the man-thing, but he never once moved. He didn't even look at me. Should I just lock the door back up and pretend this was all a horrible nightmare? I mean, I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I couldn't afford to leave to find somewhere new even if I wanted to. And then my mind returned to the note's message. Dusk was approaching, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to indulge my curiosity just once. Then I could figure out what to do. So, I went to the sink and filled the blue cup up with water and waited. It wasn't until he had licked up the last drops from the bottom of the cup that he finally turned to look at me. He moved slowly, like bone grinding on bone, and he blinked once, twice, deliberately and carefully, like he was trying to remember how. His chest was moving with shallow, erratic breaths and I could smell something meat-sweet and wrong roiling off of him. He lifted the corners of his small, tight-lipped mouth into some semblance of what I think was meant to be a smile. The skin of his lips was raw and gnawed, as if he had been chewing on them. And with a slight, jerky nod of his pale, bald head, he retreated into the dark. I know technically, I could have left. Most people in their right minds would have left the second they saw the padlocked door. But I was broke and stupid and I can't justify why I continued to provide the man in the wall with water, but it became our own little ritual. It was like he had become a proxy for everything I had failed at previously. At least he was predictable. At least I mattered. He depended on me twice a day, every day. And so it continued. His voice was thin and brittle and carried a dry rasp with it, his throat raw from disuse. There was a tremble to it, not quite fear, not quite madness, but something jagged and hungry in between. In a whisper that barely rose above a breath, but which still crawled into my ears, wet and intimate, all the same, he crooned more. I wanted to continue fulfilling my side of our partnership, so I brought him more, cup after cup. He lapped each one up, working with the same desperation as a thirsty dog dragging its too-swollen tongue over the dregs of an almost empty bowl, head low, mouth open, greed swallowing grace. After each cup reached its very last drops, there was not the usual satisfaction, but instead just panting, trembling, and the dawning dread of needing it again. A shudder ran through him. His fingers twitched. But it's never enough. Never enough. Never ever enough. It drinks through us now. Through skin. Through sleep. It waits in the wet. It waits in the walls. With that, his voice broke into a croak, barely audible now. Every apartment door I tried opened and every single one was empty, completely devoid of life. They all bore the same layout as my own, identical padlocked closet doors and all, and each one was equipped with its very own red cup placed gently, tenderly on the counter. He started asking for more again, timing his requests with the rhythmic, fleshy plops resonating through the room. Drip. 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 More. 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 Drip. 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 He gets thirsty and I broke the rules.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
However, the things I saw last week have made me reconsider that decision. I got the call around 11 a.m. A father had taken his 10-year-old son fly fishing. At one point, the father managed to stab a hook all the way through his finger. He went back up to his truck to get a first aid kit. The boy was gone when he returned a few minutes later. I was surprised. I hadn't expected to find him alive, but I had at least anticipated finding a body. However, there was no trace of him. The sun got low and the air grew colder. We were considering calling it off as nightfall approached and resuming the search the next day when I discovered something. There's a lot of creek beds around the river. Many of them have dried up as a result of encroaching vegetation or man-made efforts to divert the water. We usually don't pay any attention to them. However, with all of the recent rain, I noticed that one of the larger creek beds had begun flowing again. A surprising amount of water crashed through it, easily enough to carry a young boy. The creek ran directly across a bend in the river, connecting it at 2 points. I followed it and realized that the boy could be located outside of our initial search area. As I approached where the creek reconnected with the main river, I felt a sinking feeling in my gut. The creek ended exactly in the center of the Badwater region. As I reached it, I stopped and chewed my lip thoughtfully. If I went back and reported this to the other divers, they would tell me to let it go. They wouldn't let me dive there. But deep down I felt like the boy's body must be tangled up in some weeds nearby. If only I could find it. I hated the idea of that kid being stuck down there, slowly bloating and rotting away while his parents sat at home wondering where their boy had gone. Badwater didn't seem to be that bad. I'd seen rougher waters before, but I knew looks could be deceiving. Just below the surface it could be flowing faster than I ever imagined. And I'd be swept away in an instant. Besides, I wasn't supposed to dive alone. I almost turned back, but something made me stay. I stared into the river for a moment, thinking about the boy. Then I put on my gear and dropped into the icy waters. I went even deeper until finally green shapes began to materialize in front of me. I thought I'd finally reached a bed of weeds. But, as I kicked lower, the truth came into full view. I felt vomit come up at the sight, an odd and dangerous sensation when you're wearing a scuba mask. It was then that I saw the boy. His eyes stared sightlessly ahead as those grotesque arms pulled his dead body downward. It seemed they had just gotten a hold of him. The arms yanked at him, burying him in the surrounding sediment. They pushed and writhed and squirmed until he was securely buried up to the chest. I stared in mesmerized horror. That was when the other bodies came into focus. There must have been at least 4 more, all in varying stages of decay. Some were bloated beyond recognition, only bulky, white masses that protruded loosely from the riverbed. I once again felt vomit rising in my throat and swallowed it back down. The fucking hands were feeding off the bodies, using them as fertilizer. The moment I clambered out of the water I tore my mask off and retched. I couldn't stop thinking about those disgusting bodies, those grasping hands. They were like some sort of carnivorous plant, yet they were so humanoid. I vomited again at the thought. I frantically ran back to our base camp and pulled one of the other divers aside. Moose was the most experienced person on our team. He'd been diving for over 20 years ever since moving here. I told him about what I saw. When I finished, he stared at me in cold silence. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed tightly. "Don't tell anyone else about this. If the others find out you went into Badwater," he trailed off and thought for a moment. Well, it won't be good. He shook his head like a disappointed father. But what about those things? I tried to keep my voice down, hoping no one would hear us. How many people have died because of those fucking things? I started to say something, but the words caught in my throat. He was keeping something from me. He walked away after that and called off the day's search. Despite what I'd told him, we continued to search for the next 2 days. By the third day we called it off completely and gave our condolences to the family. I don't know what the fuck is happening. Moose has been acting different towards me ever since. There's an iciness to him, but every now and then he'll shoot me a knowing glance, like we're in on some secret together. I've noticed the other older divers acting strangely too. What did he mean by agreement? What the fuck were those arm things? I'm considering quitting and moving away from here. I can't live with the knowledge that those things are down there, slowly feeding off the body of a young boy among countless others. Part 2.
Whew, that one gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
I used to look out the rusted iron bars of my window and dream about being a bird. I crept over to the window and smiled at the bird. "Hello, little girl," said the crow. "You know how to talk," I said. My stomach gave a weak growl. "Yes," I said. "That would be wonderful." "I didn't know they put people in cages," he said. "Do you think they mistook you for a bird?" "I don't think so, Mr. Crow," I said. We whiled away the rest of that day talking. The crow told me all about what it was like to fly, how there was no better feeling in the world. He told me about the faraway lands he had visited when he was a young bird and could still make the journey north with the changing of the seasons. Finally, evening came and the crow said that he had to go. The next morning he was back, however, with 2 more branches of figs. I thanked him for his generosity, and we talked another day away. That day he even sang me a song. He didn't have a voice for singing, but I thought his song was beautiful anyway. We passed the entire fall that way, and the bird's visits became the only bright spot in my life. He brought me not only figs, but cherries and walnuts too / anything small enough for him to carry. One morning, when the first snows of winter had fallen, the crow asked me a question. "Now you can fly free, little girl," he said. "No more cages for you." Mr. Crow shook his head. I still wake up every morning to hear the birds sing, and when the first few notes break the silence of the early dawn, I think of Mr. Crow and smile. 10.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I was just doing the dishes, but I love writing stuff. Hey guys, I need some advice. Wait, why is my bed warm? I don't have an electric comforter and my dog wasn't in my bed. I quickly got up and turned my lights on, looking around the room. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary other than my closet being slightly ajar. I chalked it up to mere coincidence, assuming I accidentally left it like that. I sat back on my bed and pulled out my phone. "Hey, Mom, I'm a little freaked out. When are you and Dad coming home?" I texted my mom. Damn it. I thought out loud before typing my response. "Yeah, I understand. Call me if anything happens or if you just need to talk, okay? I love you." Wait. No, I wouldn't have. Shit. I exclaimed, freaking myself out even more. The sink is facing a wall and I had my headphones on, someone would have easily slipped past my back, I thought to myself. 10 minutes pass, then 15, then 20. I couldn't get to sleep. My eyes were wide open, fear overwhelming me. I sat up and turned the lights on again. It rang once, it rang twice, it rang a third time. She said to call her if I needed her, and she didn't answer. They would check the rooms nearby and the bathroom was the furthest. If I can get there quick enough and call the cops, maybe I'll have the time to wait them out. I reached the bathroom door and closed it softly behind myself, locking the door and pushing a chair up under the doorknob. I quickly climbed into the closet and shimmied my way behind all of the towels and toiletries. Once settled into my hiding spot, I pull out my phone and call the cops. They send officers to my house and say that they'll arrive in 10 minutes and to stay silent until then. Okay, I can do that. To pass the time, and to keep myself from sobbing, I open Reddit and start typing this. So, my question is, what should I do in this situation? What if the cops don't arrive in time? What if? Update, don't worry, guys. I'm okay. The person found me, but it's okay. He was nice enough to let me live, as long as I do whatever he says whenever he says.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I never said this to his face, but fuck was he annoying. Anytime I ever felt like I had a moment to myself, there's Steve, making some hammed-up attempt at making me like him, and trust him, despite knowing him since my first day. I never could shake the feeling he was fake and that I didn't like him. Jesus. No, Steven. You're alright. No, he wasn't. He was exhausting. I was just in my head a little. I gestured to the water cooler. It was directly behind my cubicle against the wall. Shitty access. I could see that. Took you forever to drink that cup. I missed the sea, Aquaman. He laughed. God, that insufferable laugh. So forced, so fake, so donkey-like. Why couldn't he just get the hint? I could drink 50 cups of this metallic lethe of Hades than spend another moment with this man. No, frankly, I'm alone. 1 minute of Steve. Yeah, sure. I can do it. I've never done a night shift before. Why would a paper company even need a night shift? I had worked there for maybe 2-3 months. I don't remember. Heck, I don't even remember applying for the position. That's what struck me at that moment. I didn't even recoil at Steve patting me on the back at my response. Why couldn't I remember? Everyone remembers when they start their new job. Was I that lazy and eager to leave? Steve snapped me out of it. As I quickly tossed the cup into the little trash bin next to it, I felt frozen. Not like the temperature, but like I didn't want to move. I swear I was being watched. Me being alone in here wouldn't be out of the ordinary, but the buzzing of the fluorescent light, accompanied by the drab gray walls and flooring, really set off alarm bells. I quickly grabbed my shit and left. Sitting in my home, my phone rang. Another spam call. Lately, I've been getting pranks from people pretending to be family members, crying and stuff, the whole 9 yards. Never been punked before, and I wouldn't be punked then. Blocked. Again. Jack. Hey, ma boy. My coworker walked away from him and passed me to go to her cubicle. Before I could even swing my head around to Steve's direction, he already had his hands on my shoulder and was forcing me to walk with him as we talked. It always had to be how Steve liked it, from the conversation to even where you spoke. We stopped before the water cooler where we spoke yesterday before continuing. I'm so glad you took the night shift this Sunday. It's no picnic. Same stuff you do here with a few extra activities. He looked at me like he wanted me to do something. Thank you, I said to him. Hopefully that was what he wanted. Thanks, Kayla. She gave me the bottle so that I could wash my mouth out and snickered when she saw the translucent black liquid I would spit out. Licorice, she said as I looked at her with a defeated, weak smile. I wish. I lightly chuckled, then checked my mouth to see if there was anything else to wash out. She smiled warmly, and we walked out. What was in my vomit? I hadn't eaten anything that color, and last time I checked, I didn't have a stomach ulcer. So either I unknowingly ate a licorice that day, or I had internal bleeding. Well, what's the question? She handed me the newspaper she was doing it on and tapped at the question. Workin', hard or hardly workin'? I looked at him honestly for once. Unamused. He looked at me for a moment, squinting his eyes in thought. You doin' alright, lad? I'm fine, I'm a little under the weather. He looks at Kayla and back at me. Honest, I said. You look like you need some water, ma boy. I really should. But then I remember I already have a bottle of water. Oh, Jack. Company policy, you're not allowed to bring your own drinks. Something about waste management, otherwise we wouldn't need the cooler. He chuckled. The cooler. The only drinkable source of water. Tastes like metal and would probably give me whatever poisoning. I didn't know how much the water company that supplied us was paying for a policy like that to be a thing, and nor did I care. I nodded. Later that evening, 5 p.m. rolled around, and it was time to head off. Everyone was getting ready to leave like clockwork. John, my boss, came out this time and stood in front of his office, and as if like magic, everyone besides me and Kayla came to a halt, and he had their attention like a general. Good job, everyone. You've done very well here. Jack, our fine worker over here, is doing the Sunday night shift. Round of applause. He began to clap as everyone looked to me with smiles and rapt attention. I hated it. Kayla clapped too, but a little more awkwardly, not seeing the big deal. John held his suspenders out like one of those southern lawyers on TV. Besides his southern accent, he always gave that vibe. Welp. Time for y'all to get going, he said with a smile of pride for his worker ants, and we continued packing up. Kayla was first out the door this time, and she had said bye to me and gone into the elevator, going down to the ground floor. As I waited for the elevator to make its way back up, I noticed something. Silence. Only the hum of office lights. Where were my other coworkers? Where was, for Pete's sake, where was Steve? Again with the helicopter. I swore that if there was a secret executive elevator. I made my way into the offices, and again, they were empty. How was this possible? No personal belongings. Besides Kayla, I didn't think anyone ever brought something personal of theirs to work. All the cubicles were identical except for work stationery. Minus me, Kayla, and well. As I turned around, I was met by the face of my new coworker, Tom, and yelped in fear. He did too. Gah! What the hell is wrong with you, Jack? He looked at me like he didn't just Scooby-Doo me, and made me jump out of my skin. Why was everyone startling me lately? It's like everyone had their job quota on scaring me. Tom was a younger man, roughly around 19 to 20. His voice reminded me of that Simpsons teenager with the pimples all over his face. Right back at you. Where is everyone? He looked around nervously and came close to me, and said, I don't know. I never see them leave. It's so strange. And they're creepy. Sometimes they just stare at you and smile. He looked behind me like he was checking if anyone was watching. I rushed into the office and put my stuff in the cubicle, and gave Kayla a, "I hope they're not mad," look. As I went to sit down, my boss, John, placed his hand on my shoulder. I stopped myself from sitting and turned around. "I'm so sorry, sir. I was having trouble this morning." He smiled and took a step back, gesturing for me to stand next to him. "Son, I'm aware that you've been feeling under the weather lately. That was putting it lightly. We're a family here, Jack. If you need anything, and we mean anything, just ask us." I was touched. I've heard about companies and workplaces saying BS like, "We're a family," or "Welcome to the company name family," but I could tell John meant it. "Thank you, sir," I said as he walked away. I went to grab a plastic cup from the water cooler's cup holder before I remembered Tom's words of warning from last night, "Don't drink the water." I stopped myself. What was the harm in heeding his words? After all, I could never enjoy a cup of this gunk as it tastes as if I ate something like a bug. A robot bug. Next time I'll just bring a bottle of water or some soda. I sat there with a pit in my stomach. What did he mean by, "Who's Tom?" Tom. Coworker Tom. The same Tom who wouldn't shut up about his girlfriend Carrie whenever we spoke, for crying out loud. I breathed. Maybe I had his name wrong this whole time, and I'm an asshole. Tom or whoever it was that spoke to me was genuinely spooked by this place, and I was starting to see why. I didn't know if what I saw earlier by the water cooler was real, but I was sure as hell not touching it again. It was probably laced with some sort of silver or mercury, and it was making me see things. Maybe they didn't know. I looked at Kayla, tongue-in-cheek, as she did another crossword. "Psst, Kayla." She looked up at me and put her newspaper down, and whispered back. "What?" I got as close to the gap between our cubicles as possible. "Right. Understood." I sat back in my chair and looked to my left as Steve walked in carrying a large container of files. "Are you okay, Jack?" I snapped out of it. He was fine. He looked normal. Was it the water that was making me see? Or was it the lack of it that was helping me see? "I'm sorry, Steve. Been a rough few days." He chuckled. I picked up the box and carried it into the hallway. There was Steve's office. He had his own executive stuff, the bathrooms, the sorting room, the delivery room, and finally the mail room. The sorting room is where I needed to go, but the mail room is what caught my eye. It had a big padlock on the door. Why the hell they needed to lock up the mail room is beyond me, but not the weirdest thing I've seen today. I walked into the sorting room and placed the box of files down on the dusty bench. This whole place was dusty. It was mainly tidy and not much lying around, but dust covered everything. I started to sort the files into their respective shelves when I accidentally knocked something off. A picture frame that was sitting above one of the files horizontally had fallen to the ground when I lifted some of the files. I picked it up. My lord, why did I pick it up? Sure, it ended up helping, but maybe if I had just left it there, or put it back on the shelf without looking, maybe Kayla would have still been alive.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I'm a fire watcher. I found another fire watcher's unsettling journal at my new station, by Flard. 185 days. That's 5 days longer than our stint here should have been. Normally, they rotate us out every 180 days. We were supposed to be picked up by helicopter 5 days ago. I started writing this logbook, journal, whatever, because we're overdue for evac. Or so we think. Maybe we messed up the calendar somehow. Get up. There's smoke. Smoke. Huh. I said, still half delirious. Yes, smoke. A really small stream of it maybe a mile southeast. His eyes were wide and brighter than the sunlight on his uniform. For those who don't know what a fire watchtower looks like, it's basically a wooden cabin elevated about 100 feet in the air. Ours has a staircase that wraps around the structure beneath the cabin. I'm pretty sure other towers use ladders, but that's beside the point. Clark and I bunk up in the watchtower. We have a little kitchen, our bunk bed, and a 360-degree view of nothing but woods. Thomas sleeps in a tiny little cabin at the base of our tower, which is also where our main office is. Office may be too loose of a term. It's one desk and a typewriter used for typing out reports of what we see out here. Our main radio back to base isn't getting a sign of life from anywhere. And if it isn't receiving from anywhere, we assume we aren't being heard from anywhere. Luckily, we still have our own walkie-talkies to communicate with each other. Clark took out his walkie. "Tom, there's some smoke about a mile southeast. Can you go check it out?" A few seconds passed before Thomas responded. "After I finish wiping my ass I'll be on my way. Unless you want to help me with that, Clarky." Thomas, the oldest of us, is always picking on Clark, the youngest. He doesn't really dislike Clark. He is just easy to pick on. He's a 23-year-old college dropout. I think he studied accounting or finance or something on his parents' dime. I don't think he left college to be a professional fire watcher. No, I think he left to come out in the wilderness, be alone, and take a retrospective look at his life to decide what he really wants. As for me, it's not important why I'm out here. Clark cocked his head towards mine. "Teddy," he said to me, "Thomas has been acting different. Weird. I know. He doesn't seem to be bothered that we are stuck out here. We don't know if we are stuck out here. We could have scratched off the dates wrong. You know, we thought we didn't scratch the day off yet, but we really did, so we accidentally scratched the next day too." "I guess," Clark said softly. I knew what he was going to say next. "At night though." "Maybe he does. So what if the guy goes out at night to stare at trees?" "Trees? Stare at trees? I know you've seen it. He goes out near the tree line and stands there for a while looking out. Sometimes hours. Maybe he does have a screw loose, and maybe he shouldn't be out here. But I don't think it's the best idea to bring it up to him when we are trapped here with him, especially if he is insane." What? It's 11:30 p.m. Thomas isn't back. He left at about 7 a.m. He hasn't answered his radio. Tomorrow will be day 186. We do not know if Thomas is okay, and one of us will most likely have to check the woods tomorrow, and since Clark is chicken shit, it'll end up being me. I was leaned back in my swivel chair, spinning slowly, making sure there were no lights or fires in the dark expanse of trees, and wondering where Thomas was. He must have been hurt. Even if he was lost, he'd reply on his walkie. We always answer our walkies. They're with us at all times, even when we are shitting or showering. "It's going to sound crazy," he warned. "I don't remember coming out here. Do you? Do you remember applying for this job? Do you remember being interviewed? Or being flown out here?" I didn't remember. He continued, "You know how I said I decided to leave college? Well, now that I'm thinking about it harder, I don't know if I did. I mean, I must have, right? To be out here. I must have. But all I can remember is my last day of class for the semester, and then I was here. I don't remember anything between coming home after class and meeting you and Thomas. I couldn't remember. I tried and am still trying. There are more pages scattered about, but I haven't figured out the order. Some are ripped and some are faded beyond recognition. But there is a more pressing and imminent problem at hand. About 30 minutes ago I met Gary and Harold. We have been stationed out here for the next 180 days. And I don't know whether to tell them that I don't remember coming here.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I Met a Demon on the Tokyo Subway, by Life Estrange Matu. This story is a retelling of something that happened to me when I was 7 years old. As the years have gone by and I've grown up, I've realized that the story cannot possibly be true, yet I can't shake the feeling that it is. This human is creeping me out, he said. It almost looks like it's looking right at me. I am looking right at you, I said. Am I in the fifth dimension? I asked. Your mind must have slipped over here by mistake. What were you thinking about before you saw me? I thought for a moment, and then grinned. Being crazy is a good thing in the fifth dimension, the demon replied. I laughed. Yes, but who wants to fly? Taking the train is so much faster, and if I fly to work I'm all sweaty when I get there. I put them over my head when it rains. I laughed again. Yes, yes, the demon replied, not looking at me but at something behind me. Say, would you like to see a magic trick? Okay. The demon reached up and tugged a big rainbow handkerchief out of his snout. He must have pulled out 20 feet before he ran out. That's funny. I laughed, but I stopped when I realized I wasn't holding my dad's hand anymore. I can't see the subway station anymore, I said. What do you mean? Sometimes when I'm bored or sad, my mind slips off to the third dimension, and I see people like you. That's funny, I laughed. Can you go to other dimensions, too? But the demon didn't answer, he was looking up at the sky. It's starting to rain, he said, whooshing his wings up over his head. Warm droplets of rain hit my face. I opened my eyes and saw my mom crying over me, but I didn't see my dad. Where's Dad? I asked her. Did he bring me home? Yes, darling, she said, although she didn't look at me when she said it. He brought you home and then he had to go away. I don't know, she said. He said it was a monstrously tall and furry creature, with leathery black wings and an anteater's snout.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Part 2. There are countless dilapidated ancient structures around the world, and some of them, not all, but some, were communication arrays. At least a handful on each continent. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few after I describe what we did. There was something else now. It wasn't a voice. It was some sort of intelligent vibration. I can't explain it. It was like a voice was inside my chest, but it wasn't speaking, I could just feel what it was saying. My cohorts and I debated on the exact wording afterwards, but we all agreed on the overall messages each time. Woowa, you guys are back. Is what I felt in my chest. My colleagues and I stared at each other in utter confusion. One of them spoke up. Hello? He asked hesitantly. There was a silence for a moment, before the thrumming spoke back. I think I have it set right now, say that again. Hello. I repeated back to it in place of the other scientist. Yep, there it is. He said quickly. You guys figured it out again. That's crazy. It exclaimed. This wasn't what I was thinking the first human/alien conversation was going to go. I wasn't even sure that this was first contact at this point though. Who is this? What is this? I asked loudly into the open air of our control room. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to give you details like who we are, but what this is the ultimate form of communication in our universe. Your ancestors figured it out briefly too. With some quick deduction on how it was wording things, I think each of us figured out what we were talking to was alien in origin around the same time. We all looked at each other. It was speaking utter bullshit to us now. That was impossible, we'd never be able to communicate, ever. Physically impossible. We explained that to the chest voice, and we were met by an equal level of confusion. Why are you still using light as a yardstick? It asked incredulously. Suddenly, its voice grew slightly dire. You're still not advanced enough. You don't even know. You are dead center in the life abyss. There is no life on any planet around you, for more than 10 of your observable universes around you in any direction. It's a universal mystery how you're even alive. It spoke grimly. Never in my life had I felt smaller, more insignificant and more alone. It continued.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
I just graduated from medical school, and my new hospital has some very strange rules, by Beifel's disciple. You probably think that all doctors are filthy rich, because I sure as hell did in the beginning. 8 years and a fistful of premature gray hairs later, I'm just a few $100,000 poorer than broke. That would matter if I had a family to provide for, but the long hours in med school have led to an end of my last relationship and a countdown on the shelf life of my ovaries. I like to think of myself as the rat that wouldn't drown. Dr. Vivian Scrit is, without a doubt, the biggest bitch I've ever met. We gawked at one another, all feeling weak and small, then scampered after her. I was last in line, and felt out of place taking even that much. You should have the list of expectations for St. Francis, Dr. Scrit explained as she walked on, not bothering to look at us as she talked. I printed 18 sets of rules so that you would have to challenge one another for them, knowing that one of you would be left behind. An icy cold settled in the pit of my stomach as I saw everyone look down at a list of rules that only I did not have. Well, she shot out in exasperation, why are you standing here? People are dying. Get to work. No one wanted to show me their list of rules, so I had to wait until one of my classmates died. I stopped immediately. Myron? I squeaked. What the hell is that? His arms were working furiously, but his back was turned toward me, so I couldn't see what he was doing. Something felt wrong. Slowly, I approached Myron, not wanted to startle him. We're really busy right now, is there something you need help with? He showed no outward signs that he had heard me. Instead, he kept pumping away furiously at the task at hand. Which made no sense, since he had been alone in the room. Myron? I whispered, barely loudly enough to hear my own words. Myron's abdomen was split from sternum to pelvis. His esophagus spilled out, and his stomach sat on the table. A nest of quivering small intestine led from the bottom of his stomach back into his shredded torso. He clutched his own stomach tightly in his left hand, the fold squirting through his fingers like unbaked bread. His right hand was working furiously with a scalpel, sawing his organ into ribbons. Rivers of sweat poured down his forehead with the intensity of the effort. I tried to scream, but it only came out as a moan. Slowly, he raised his head. Slowly, he smiled. He bit. He chewed. I had learned very early in my medical career that compartmentalization is indispensable. That instinct took over my brain in the moment, and I acted clinically. Myron was still grasping his scalpel with his right hand. I kicked it, hard, and it flew out of his hands. Myron was anesthetized, subdued, and extracted within a minute of their arrival. For a moment, I was alone with a pool of blood and diced stomach lining. The practical part of my brain continued to drive me. I snatched the paper from the ground, then quickly exited the room, taking care to avoid the puddle. I didn't want to leave any bloody footprints in my wake. 3. If any other doctor is approached or detained by someone in a janitor's uniform, do not interfere. Never ask about that former doctor again. 4. Never touch any seemingly abandoned Reese's peanut butter cups. Those are Dr. Scrit's favorite candy. 5. Any child that dies in St. Francis Hospital must be cremated within 120 minutes of official time of death. If you suspect this rule has been broken, alert Dr. Scrit, and the hospital will be evacuated. 6. There is no children's burn unit at St. Francis Hospital. If you find yourself there, continue walking until you return to familiar territory. This usually requires traveling in a straight line down the central hallway for 47 minutes. You will not reach a wall during that interval. 7. This rule is on a need-to-know basis. 10. If find yourself on the hospital roof with no memory of how you got there, you have only two choices. Either wait for an extraction team to find you, or jump 4 stories to the sidewalk on Court Street. My heart stopped when the door opened. Dr. Aphelis, she drawled gravely, I'm shocked. She stared down at the blood-stained list of rules in my hand. The ghost of a smile graced her lips before she turned to leave. I didn't realize that I'd been holding my breath until I heard my own gasp for air. Shaking, I slowly emerged from the janitor's closet. I quickly stuffed the list of rules back into my pocket, reflecting on the fact that I had just achieved what might be considered an actual win. I turned to head down the hall when I stopped in my tracks. Everything was unfamiliar. What the hell had happened? I glanced all around. The design of the hallway was familiar, but everything was off. I could hear people talking in the rooms, but the immediate vicinity was devoid of all people but myself. Nothing made sense. St. Francis Hospital, Children's, Burn Unit. Listen.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
My friend went missing at the lake. The bucket beside the counter was full the next morning, by the big craven. We arrived at the lake in the late afternoon, just as the sun dipped low enough to turn the water a beautiful, orange color. It was quiet, a bit too quiet for a place that claimed to be in peak season. I didn't answer, just shrugged, and gave her a nod of agreement. Hallows and Bait and Rentals. Inside, the air was cooler, but filled with the smell of preserved fish, which made Jack gag. Damn, this is horrid. Who can live like this? You here for cabin 6, he asked, looking at a piece of paper in front of him. I nodded, yeah, we booked online. The shopkeeper, however, didn't find it funny. He looked back at me and, a bit embarrassed, I apologized for my friend's weird sense of humor. The cabin was decent. Better than expected, actually. 2 bedrooms, a stocked fridge, and a back deck facing the lake. From there, you could almost forget the ugly shop blocking the main view. He raised an eyebrow. Sorry, did you see the name of the shop? The bait part of it? Later, as we sat by the fire pit, Jessica curled up next to me and asked what was bothering me. I said it was nothing, but she didn't buy it, she never does. I know that look, she continued. You're doing that thing where your brain won't shut up. A figure, the shopkeeper, I realized fast, was walking to the front door with a bucket in his hand. Same white, plastic one from earlier. I watched as he disappeared around the side of the building. It seemed normal, although my mind couldn't help but wonder, where was he going? What's inside that bucket? The night was quiet, but I couldn't sleep well. Every creak of the cabin made me tense, and whenever I finally drifted off, I was awoken by the wind outside. I finally decided to check the shop. Inside, the shopkeeper stood behind the counter again, exactly as we'd seen him before, like he hadn't moved since yesterday. Hey, I said, have you seen our friend? You know, tall, buzzcut, wearing a black hoodie. He looked up slowly. You mean the loud one? Was he going out on the lake? He added. I shook my head. No, not without us. I didn't like the way he said that. He was too calm, like it happened frequently. Jessica arrived shortly after, clearly frustrated. She asked him the same question, and he just repeated himself, word for word, like it was a script. Then, as we were leaving, I caught a glimpse of the same white plastic bucket tucked next to the counter. This time, the lid was off and something inside shimmered, wet and dark red. And it smelled horrible. Much worse than when we first got here. Night came, but Jack still didn't turn up. Just after 9 p.m., I told Jessica I'd head out and find him with the shopkeeper. She didn't want me going alone, but I promised I'd be back in 20 minutes. The front door of the shop was open. The place didn't feel empty, though. I heard some type of rhythmic clicking coming from the door behind the counter. I assumed the shopkeeper was busy with something, but he hadn't answered, and since it was ajar, I assumed it was fine to go inside. I wish I hadn't. Instead of a storage room, there was a stairwell, leading down. Rough wooden steps, creaking under my every step. A light buzzed at the bottom, flickering as I approached it. At the end, the water gently moved, like something had moved inside it. From the far edge of the pool, the direction I came from, something rose. Its head twitched toward me, and then it moved. It dropped from the wall, landing with a wet thud. It skittered toward me, its legs moving with impossible precision. I bolted in the only direction I could, straight into the far wall. I could hear the moisture it left behind, a sick, dragging sound that grew louder as it caught up with me. I reached the wall. The skittering stopped, but I didn't dare turn around. I blinked repeatedly, pinching myself, trying to escape this nightmare. Why did it stop? Why don't I hear it anymore? The creature was a few inches away. I could see the shimmer in its many eyes, the twitch of its joints. But it didn't move. "She's not hungry tonight," he said flatly. The shopkeeper let out a long, tired breath. "I don't know where they found her. I don't know what she is. I just do my job. She came from the lake, apparently. Or she was always part of it. Doesn't matter now, does it? The order brought her back here years ago, and said she was safer if confined. That the disappearances wouldn't be my responsibility, they'd solve it." He pointed toward the pipes overhead. "This whole shop was built around her. The basement feeds into the lake." He didn't answer at first, and just kept staring at the water. "Told them what?" "That you'd seen her. That you went inside the basement. And that meant you either had to die. You lured me down here. You'll learn how to feed her. How to listen when she gets restless. How to keep the shop running, same as I did." Jessica never came back. I watched from the window the morning she left. She waited outside the cabin for nearly an hour before one of the, according to Mark, the shopkeeper, order vans pulled up. I don't know what they told her, but she cried into her sleep and disappeared with the van. They send deliveries sometimes, sealed crates, no paperwork. I'm not sure what's inside them, I don't dare open them. I just carry them down.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I get it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.